Zionism was invented as an antidote and a replacement for Judaism. I'm against Zionism because, like I said, Zionism is against me.
You go to the average person in Israel, you ask them, is Zionism Judaism? They'll say no.
No, that's not true.
You're 100% sure.
That's not true. Is Zionism, Judaism, the religion? They will probably say no. However,
So it is true.
However, these wars and people dying and the anti-Semitism and all this liability and suffering and death that happens to the Jews because of Israel, because maybe one day there'll be a Holocaust. Tell me, how many Jews have to die before the premium for this insurance policy gets too high?
Sure. I mean, well, should we look at it in maths? 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Maybe that could happen again. 6 million versus 70,000. I think that's pretty good statistics.
No, that's not true. Because what if there is no Holocaust? Then all of this is for nothing.
Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro is an ultra-Orthodox rabbi who writes and speaks about his opposition to Zionism. Welcome. Let's just get straight into it. What's your thoughts on Zionism? Why do you dislike it?
Well, I think that Zionism dislikes me more than I disliking it. It's kind of like asking a Jew why you dislike the Ku Klux Klan. Zionism was invented as an antidote and a replacement for Judaism. It was a new Jewish identity designed to replace the old one. The old Jewish identity, the early Zionists believed, was responsible for anti-Semitism. And what was responsible for anti-Semitism was the decrepit personality and characteristics of the Jewish people. They blamed two things on those characteristics. Characteristics, by the way, such as ugliness, immorality, weakness, lack of masculinity. These are the words that they used, and this is some of the nicer things. They blamed it on the Jewish religion, the aspirations and values of that religion. Too pacifist, too weak, wasn't interested in being involved in history. Instead, we were interested in studying and praying and kind of being religious people. The second thing they blamed was the exile, that the Jews are homeless. There are various different early Zionists that blamed the first factor more than the second more than the first, and a mix in between. So they created Zionism in order to transform the Jewish people from a religion into a nationality with all national aspirations, instead of dreaming or aspiring to be great scholars or righteous people, scholars and righteous according to the definitions of the Torah. They figured that now we're going to aspire to win gold medals, have a strong army, Eurovision song contests, a great economy, and be, as they said, part of the family of nations. So basically, it was a replacement for Jewish identity. So the more Zionism succeeds, the more Judaism fails.
How is it a replacement for Jewish identity?
I'm sorry?
How is it a replacement for Jewish identity?
Because the definition of a Jew, according to Judaism, is somebody that's obligated to fulfill 613 commandments given to us by God on Mount Sinai.
We'll get back to Yaakov Shapiro in a minute. Before we go further, I just want to take a minute to talk about today's sponsor, private internet access. Protecting your personal information online has never been more important, and that's exactly what a VPN helps with. A VPN hides your IP address and encrypts your internet activity. That means your data stays private, your browsing stays secure, and websites can't easily track you. Now, I've tried other VPNs before, but the biggest issue is that they often slow down your internet, and the lag makes it almost impossible to do anything. But private internet access is different. It keeps your internet fast while still giving you top-level privacy and security. As well as that, it also allows you to unlock region-restricted content on platforms like Netflix, giving you access to movies and shows that aren't typically available in your country. Private internet access allows unlimited devices, so you can protect your entire household or workplace with just one single subscription. And with MyLink, that's only $2 a month. They also have a 30-day money-back guarantee, and on Trustpilot, they have 4.3-star rating from over 10,000 reviews. Try it out today by clicking the link in the description or searching piavpn.com/Eli Hassell. And with your first purchase, you also get 4 months completely free. You've got to try it.
A little background. The Jewish religion, according to Jewish religion, you don't have to be a Jew to serve God per se. Non-Jewish people are not going to burn in hell like they would be in other religions if you don't accept the religion, but rather non-Jewish people serve God by fulfilling the 7 Noahide commandments given to Noah and his seed, which is the whole world. However, there were people who at Mount Sinai, as the biblical story in the book of Exodus tells, were given the Torah by God. The Torah commands 613 mitzvahs, commandments, and that's the definition of a Jew. Somebody who has been given not merely the commandments as rituals, but it's an actual lifestyle. It comes with a set of values, aspirations. It comes with a purpose of your life. And that was the time and place the Jewish people were born at, Mount Sinai in the desert. And that's what the Jews aspired to all their lives, to the best of their ability, each one according to his own individual ability, and the community according to their ability, depending upon time and place. Their goal was that you're a good Jew if you're more righteous and more scholarly. The Zionists decided that, no, you're a good Jew if you're more loyal not to God. According to Judaism, loyalty to God is where a Jew's loyalty goes, and that makes you a better Jew. Loyalty to God is not the point. It's loyalty to the nation. Religion isn't the point, although it's okay. There are a lot of nations, nationalities, peoples that had religions. The Nordic people worshipped Odin, and the Greeks worshipped Zeus. And the Jews have their own religion as well, but you don't need to fulfill the religion or even to believe in it in order to be a good Jew. Just like you don't need religion in order to be a good American or Mexican or Briton. And even though in Britain there is a official national religion, right? They have the Church of England, and there's no separation of church and state. But to be a good Englishman, correct me if I'm wrong, you may know better, you don't need to believe in and be a righteous Christian according to the rules of the Church of England. Rather, it's national aspirations. Successful Jewish people are successful if they have a strong economy, strong army, invent things, go down in history as all the things that nations aspire to, which is not what religions aspire to. Nationalities and religions are two completely different things. The values, the goals, what's considered success and failure as a religion is not the same as what's considered success and failure to a nation. And the Zionists wanted the second. We believe in the first.
But just to be clear, you're saying Judaism is where all the people from Mount Sinai, and but in a practical sense, it's from the mother. It's if your mother is Jewish, therefore you are, and it's or you've converted through an Orthodox conversion. Now, Israel doesn't specifically say, correct me if I'm wrong, that they're the Orthodox. They don't represent the Orthodox Jewish community because they represent the Reform community, different communities as well, which have different views. Which you go through different ways. It can be from the father. It could be different. Yeah,
well, that's true, but that makes it worse. You're strengthening my point. The definition of a Jew, according to Israeli law, and Israeli law, first of all, has no business. That's one of the problems defining what a Jew is. But they have a law of return that any Jew can come there. Now, in order for a law of return to work, it's a legal status being a Jew, so you need a definition of a Jew. According to the Zionist definition right now, it's somebody who's a Jew according to the Jewish religion. There were different times and places where they used the Orthodox version, not the Orthodox version. They used one of any 4 grandparents, various different things, which is part of the problem. Ben Gurion said that the Knesset today gets to define what a Jew is. Today, according to Zionist law, according to Israeli law, not all Jews, according to the religion, are Jews for the law of return. According to the Jewish religion, if you're born Jewish, meaning if you're born obligated to fulfill the 613 commandments, and is the obligation, I must emphasize this, that is the definition of a Jew. It's not a brotherhood of Jews. It's not a club. It's not a family per se, because you can convert to Judaism. The obligation to fulfill the 613 commandments makes you a Jew and gives you whatever privileges and responsibilities come with that. If you're an atheist, you're still obligated to fulfill the 613 commandments. It's just you're not doing it. So you're Jew and not in good standing. And obviously, atheists are Jews according to Israeli law. Otherwise, Ben Gurion would not have been a Jew according to the law. Many of these Zionists are atheists. But according to Israeli law, if you were born Jewish and you believe in another religion, if you believe Jesus is the Messiah, Muhammad is the prophet, you are not Jewish according to law. There was a Supreme Court case. There was a guy, Oswald Refusion. He became a Christian monk. His name was Brother Daniel after his conversion. And he helped Jews escape the Nazis in World War II because of his status as a non-Jewish clergyman. After World War II, he wanted to move to Israel based on the law of return. The Supreme Court ruled in Israel that he's not Jewish because he practices another religion. So if Brother Daniel would say,
but just to be clear, he was still allowed to get in eventually. They still gave him
naturalization.
You
could be naturalized, but that's up to the judgment. It's the option of the state of Israel whether to take you or not. You don't have a right to come to Israel. He got in the same way a Chinese person can get into Israel as a Buddhist or a Chinese, somebody practicing a Chinese religion. He got in as somebody practicing a Christian religion, not as a Jew, even though according to Jewish law, he's just as Jewish, even more so than an atheist in the sense that at least he believes in God, at least he believes in a Messiah, not mine, at least he believes in creation of the world, right, etc. Nonetheless, the state of Israel decided because they have a right to decide what a Jew is, because therefore he's not Jewish, which doesn't make any sense. Imagine Brother Daniel. So Brother Daniel comes and he says, you know what? I want to be, I don't believe in Christianity anymore. You're not going to let me in. I don't believe in any God. There's no Messiah, no God, no Old Testament, no New Testament, nothing. I'm an atheist. Oh, now you're an atheist. Now we'll let you in. Now you're Jewish. if I say, I believe in a God, but a Trinity. Oh, you're not Jewish, but you don't believe in any God.
I would say that the distinction. The distinction between the actual Orthodox definition of Judaism, or even like you said, even beyond that, whether if you're Jewish and then become Christian, it's still, I think, in any definition of Judaism, you're still a Jew. To Israel's definition of Judaism is because they are separate. That Israel represents a lot of Jewish people, but they are not intrinsically Jewish. They are separate.
What do you mean? If you're not Jewish, why don't you qualify for the law of return? If you are Jewish, why don't you qualify for the law of return?
And you're Christian?
Yes.
Because honestly, probably because of two reasons. Probably because Israel's leaders are very irreligious.
But if you are religious, but that doesn't matter. According to Israeli law, if you're a Jew, you're qualified. So you're saying that because of the philosophy of Israel's leaders, they redefined what it means to be a Jew.
Well, they kept the definition really open in the sense that even, let's say, Reform, where you'd say it wasn't. We've got to start with the question: is Israel a Jewish state or an Orthodox religious state?
Israel is the Jewish state. Clearly, it's not Orthodox. They defined this themselves. Israel is to the Jews what Japan is to the Japanese and France is to the French. That's on Israel's website, actually. Victor Lieberman wrote an article. He was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now it's in the embassy part of their website. The definition of a Jewish state is that the Jews are a national. In fact, I have it for you here. I prepared some things that I anticipated we may end up talking about. There's an article called The Meaning of Israel as the State of the Jewish People. This is in Israel's own website, an article written by Victor Lieberman. Here's the important quote. The term Jewish state refers primarily to nationality. Israel is to the Jewish people what France is to the French people, Ireland is to the Irish, and Japan is to the Japanese. Which means, by the Zionist definition, Jews are a nationality and Israel is the state of that nationality. Israel is to the Jews what France is to the French, and Ireland is to the Irish, and Japan is to the Japanese. Now, that's not true. Israel is not to the Jews. I'm an American by nationality. My family comes from Poland. I have no national political connection to Israel at all. But Israel claims that part of Jewish identity is being a national of the state of Israel. Another place where this manifests itself is, well, I neglected to bring this book here, but Benjamin Netanyahu wrote a book called Among the Family of Nations. On page 88, and I only know it by heart because I've quoted it so many times, he explains why he believes anti-Zionism is necessarily anti-Semitism. He says, saying that I'm pro-Jew, but I'm against the existence of Israel, is like saying I'm pro a French nationality, French identity, but I'm against the existence of France. Israel has subsumed, or they claim to have subsumed, Jewish identity in that the Jews are a nationality and Israel is the nation state of that nationality. In Judaism, the Jews are a religion, or really more accurately, if you really want to make it precise, that being Jewish is a job description given by God at Mount Sinai. According to the Torah, the Jews were born at Mount Sinai. As it says in the Torah, Hayoim hazeh nihiyeh solo'om. Today you have become a people. Israel's Declaration of Independence says, here the nation was born. Here the Jewish people were born. Israel believes that Jewish identity is politically, inherently, and intrinsically bound up with the state of Israel, in the sense that, their words, Japan is to the Japanese what Israel is to the Jews.
And
That's
how
what Israel
and
believes.
why can't Israel represent Jewish people, be a Jewish state, but Judaism still be separate?
They can
Or
represent
Orthodox
the Jewish
Judaism.
people. They could, if it would be true. How in the world do they represent the Jewish people? Explain this to me. I'm Jewish. I live in New York. How in the world? I never lived in Israel. Never planned on living in Israel. My family, my parents never
Well,
lived
let's
in
change it
Israel.
then. How can they represent the majority of the Jews?
They
Or
cannot. Because,
why?
first of all, they don't claim to represent the majority of Jews. If they claim to represent Zionists, let them say they represent Zionists. But they claim to be the state of the Jews. The Jews, not the Zionists. If they would come and say, look, you know what, we have this new political identity. It's called Zionism. And we represent whoever wants to be represented by us. Fine. I have no problem with that. Let them do that. But that is not the same as saying Japan is to the Japanese what Israel is to the Jews.
Wait a second. If the majority of Jews support it, why can't they say that?
When you say support it, what do you mean support it?
Let's break it up. That's a good point. So there's two definitions of Zionism. One is supporting the state of Israel, its existence as a Jewish state, and number two is supporting the actions they take.
The definition of Zionism is, you just heard the definition of Israel as a Jewish state. Okay, could we stick to that for a moment? You said supporting Israel. The definition of Israel as a Jewish state is not that Israel has a Jewish majority, not that Israel protects the Jews, not that Israel is a safe place for the Jews, but rather Israel is to the Jews what Japan is to the Japanese. So let me ask you, do you support Israel? Let's just assume yes. I'm not here interviewing you. Let's assume you do, okay? Now, is your country, is your nation England? Are you an English national or an Israeli national? Because according to Israeli law, because you're Jewish, Israel is to the Jews. He's not talking about. So you have two people in England, right? A Jewish Brit, Britain, that's what they call them, and a non-Jewish Britain. The non-Jewish Britain, England is to the non-Jewish Britain what Israel is to the Jewish one. Do you agree with that? You probably don't. The majority of Jews certainly don't, at least anecdotally, who I've asked. Once they hear what a Jewish state means, they say, whoa, that's not me. Now, let me tell you the evolution of this. I have in front of me the Jewish Agency World Zionist Organization Status Law of 1952. Okay, this was a law signed by Ben-Gurion, 1952. It's called Status Law. Article 1. The State of Israel regards itself as the creation of the entire Jewish people. So that's number one. The State of Israel regards itself as the creation. Now, first of all, the language, of course, is nonsense, because states don't regard themselves as anything. They're inanimate objects. What it means to say, but it doesn't want to spell it out, is that according to Zionism, Israel is the creation of all the Jewish people. Little later, in Article 5, it says as follows. The mission of gathering in the exiles, which is the central task of the State of Israel and the Zionist movement in our days, requires constant effort by the Jewish people in the diaspora. Now listen to this. The State of Israel, therefore, expects the cooperation of all Jews as individuals and groups in building up the state and assisting the immigration to it of the masses of people, etc. Israel has expectations of Jews. Well, of course, if Japan can expect things of the Japanese and France can expect things of the French, Israel can expect things of the Jews. So the first thing is Israel claims not to represent in the sense that majority of Jews like Israel's existence, or the majority of Jews don't want to see Israel bombed. You can put me in that category as well. Or the majority of Jews think that one day they may need Israel as a safe place. None of that is true. That is propaganda. But the core definition of Zionism and Israel as a Jewish state means Israel is to the Jews what Japan is to the Japanese.
Well,
and that's why.
Let me ask you a question on that then. So if the majority of the people support something, can they say they represent those people?
You can, if a majority of people support something, then the people who agree with whatever policy they're supporting can say they are agreed upon. They're supported by those people. But the fact
can they say those people support them? Like
that's not people? When you say support Israel, do these people that you're referring to believe that Israel is their country the same way Japan is the country of the Japanese? Supporting Israel isn't the issue here. That's the issue. Do you believe Israel is your country or England is your country?
Well, I think if you'd ask a lot of Jews, they'd say England or wherever they live is their country, but they might move to Israel soon, and they have that. And they support Israel's existence. They support everything. They support not everything they do.
Israel goes way beyond that. Israel says today, Israel in 1952, all the Jews, not majority, all the Jews supported Israel. All the Jews created Israel, not support. I support Israel in the sense that I don't want Israel blown up. Okay, I don't want Jerusalem bombed. I would vote to give Israel Iron Dome. But Israel's not my country. Israel claims they are. Jonathan Pollard even said, because of this, he would advise, this is on all the Israeli newspapers, American Jews to spy on America for Israel like he did.
Jonathan Pollard, he's a radical. He's crazy.
But it's not just him. Netanyahu saying that I agree with the existence of the Jews, I just don't want Israel to exist, is like saying I agree with the existence of the French, but I don't want France to exist. It's impossible. Not a question of supporting. Israel is your state. Israel is your state. The definition of a Jew is somebody who Israel says is a Jew. They have a right to define it. And secondly, Israel is a nationality. Judaism is a nationality, and Israel is their state. Do you know that according to Israeli law, there is no Israeli nationality? There are. I have in front of me
do you mean the only Israeli nationality is Jews? Or?
Yes, and it's not the only one. It's not the only one.
How are the other people that live there, the Druze?
Let me explain. Part of this is, number one, Zionism is the redefining of Jews as a nationality, meaning a political nationality. And sometimes when I tell this to people, they say, well, Jews are referred to in the Bible as Am or Goy or here, this or that. So first of all, those words don't mean political nationality, because political nationality in that sense did not even exist when the Bible was written. But they mean it's a nationality like, again, Japanese, French, Jewish is a nationality. Now, before Israel, the Jews were kind of like the Kurds. that they didn't have a state looking for a state. This is the Zionist narrative. The Jews had no flag, so the Zionists made them a flag before they had a state. The Jews had no national anthem, so the Zionists made them a national anthem before they had a state. The Jews had no national language for thousands of years. We spoke all sorts of languages. And even in the Second Commonwealth, when we had a temple, when we were in the Holy Land, we spoke Aramaic, not Hebrew. But the Zionists know that Hebrew, that common language, is a cornerstone of being a nationality, so they created modern Hebrew to be the national language of the Jewish people. In fact, there's elections now for the WZO, World Zionist Organization. In order to vote, you have to sign on something called the Jerusalem Program. One of those things is that you agree that Hebrew is the national language of the Jewish people anyway.
Are you talking about the 2018 law when it cemented it, Hebrew as an official language?
But that was Hebrew as the national language, the language of the state of Israel. But Hebrew as the national language of the Jews was there before 2018. You see, this is extremely important. There's the state of Israel and there's the Jewish nation. Let's get the relationship between them proper according to Zionism. I have in front of me case of a Supreme Court case, 2018 in Israel. According to Israeli law, there's no such thing as Israeli nationality, meaning there's Israeli citizenship. So you could be Israeli citizen.
Can you define the word nationality?
Okay, so that's part of it. So there's such a thing as a nation. Nation is a group of people. That's a valid question. Nation is a group of people united by certain factors, generally thought to be land, language, culture, history, heritage, and stuff like that. The Jews...
That's ethnicity. That's not a nation. A nation is just the borders.
Well, no, that's the... I'm sorry, Nathan, what did you just say, Nathan? Nation is what?
You said a nation is the history, the background, the shed...
The culture, land, language.
A nation is just its state, like the borders where it resides.
Well, that's not the case, because are the Kurds a nation?
Do they have self-determination?
No.
So then no.
They look at themselves as a nationality. The Jews, before 1948, were they a nation?
Jews before 1948? No.
Are Jews a nation now?
Well, Israel is a nation. It represents a lot of Jews.
Yeah. So Israeli law says that's not true. Israeli law on the Israeli, now if you want to believe that, that's fine. A lot of people do, that there's no difference between citizenship and nationality. That's fine. There
is a difference between citizenship and nationality.
So what is the difference?
So citizenship is a type of nationality.
I'm sorry, what?
A citizenship is a type of nationality.
What other type of nationalities are there?
There is residence. So it's just nationality is just the legal status of belonging to a country. That's
right. So according to Israeli law, that's not true. In fact, according to Israeli law... Let me ask you,
is that true? Is that what nationality is?
No, usually that's not the definition. I'll give you Theodore Herzels' definition of a nationality. How about that, if we're talking about Israel? I have in front of me a copy from the August 1902 article of the Maccabee in a Zionist magazine. It's titled, and I anticipated this would come up too, so I prepared this as well, Dr. Herzl's Evidence Before the Royal British Commission on Alien Immigration. Your people, right? So Dr. Herzl is now describing what a Jewish state is and what Jewish is. So somebody asked him, Major Evans Gordon, okay, who was on this committee, would you say briefly what your views are about Jewish nationalism? Answer by Herzl. I will give you my definition of a nation, and you can add the adjective Jewish. A nation is, in my mind, a historical group of men of a recognizable cohesion held together by a common enemy. That is, in my view, a nation. You hear that? Then, if you add... we're not done. Wait. Then, if you add to the word Jewish, you have what I understand to be the Jewish nation. Question: what would the common enemy be in this case? Answer: the anti-Semite. Meaning, according to Theodore Herzl, and this has evolved and still exists today, this definition, the definition of a Jew is somebody who the anti-Semites hate. The anti-Semites make the Jew. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, said that the Jews really have nothing in common. There is nothing in common that all the Jews have. I say they have in common their obligation to fulfill the 613 commandments. That makes them Jews. But if you don't believe in the Jewish religion, which Herzl did not, and he wants to have a more political definition of Jew, and that's what Zionism did, now you have to find some other definition of Jew. You can say, Eli, that it's not a nation. Don't go ahead, no problem. But there has to be some definition, something that determines that you're Jewish. Now, it's not good enough to say, well, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish, because you can't use if you're trying to define a word.
But the truth is, the reason why Israel has a very wide definition of Judaism, and that's just because of, probably a demographic threat. That's what I'm saying. Israel is not the same as Judaism.
Wait, I know. Hold on.
Yeah.
You're right. But Israel has laws about this. So the first is Israel's a Jewish state. What is a Jewish state? So you just heard the way Israel defines a Jewish state. That Israel is to you and me what Japan is to the Japanese, to all the Jews. You, me, well, we weren't around in 48, but all the Jews collectively created Israel. And Israel is the country, the nation of this state, according to Herzl. And he wrote this also in a similar thing to his book, The Jewish State, that the definition of a Jew is the group of people who the anti-Semites hate. That makes us a nation. Now, in Israel, there are different categories for every Israeli. There's Ezrach, meaning citizen, on their cards. There is Lo'um, meaning nation. And there is Das, meaning religion. Religion is easy, whatever your religion is. Jew, Hindu, Christian, Muslim, etc. Your citizenship, let's say we know what an Israeli citizen is, right? They have the rights to vote, etc. But there's something called Lo'um, means nationality. According to this Lo'um, there is no Israeli nationality, even though there should be. There isn't. Instead, there are about 120, 130 different nationalities. Jewish is one of them. Druze is another. Circassian, I think, is another. They have like 130 nationalities, but that's not religion. You could be Jewish religion and a Jewish nationality, but an Israeli citizen. So now, according to Israel, the Israeli nation-state law says that as opposed to other countries that are the countries of their citizens, Israel is not the country of the Israeli citizens. Israel is the Jewish state. It's the country of a nationality called Jew. You being Jewish, that's a nationality, like being Japanese. Being Jewish is in the same sense.
I don't think everyone would agree with that. I think only Israel.
I know that. But this is what Israeli law, this is what the Israeli concept of a Jewish nation state is, what a Jewish nation is, what a Jew is, and this is Zionism. In fact, let me tell you what happened here in the Supreme Court. I agree that people wouldn't agree with this. I don't agree with this. And you asked me at the beginning what I have against Zionism and put this on top of the list. Now, the Zionists, there were people that sued Israel. And they said, being Israeli is a nationality. Being Israeli is like being a Japanese. We have our own culture. We have our own flag. We have our own language. And Eli Hassell would have been one of the appellants because you believe, no problem with that nationality and citizenship is almost overlapping. So in this case, in 2013, they had 21 appellants in this case. Most of them, based on their names, were Jewish. Uzi Ornan, Uri Avneri, Itamar Even Zohar, Joseph Agassi, Shalomet Aloni. One of them, Ibrahim Dewiri, sounds Arabic, but most of them are Jews, okay? And they said, we want a Jewish we want an Israeli nationality. So they lost. This was an appeal case.
Just to explain what you're saying they want a clear definition of what an Israeli nationality is.
No, they wanted that that Japan should be to the Japanese what Israel's to the Israelis. Being Jewish is a religion. The L'Um should be Israeli, just like they wanted you. They wanted what you wanted. That there's an Israeli citizenship, Israeli nationality. It should be one and the same. If you want to say that you can strip a guy of his citizenship, maybe fine, you'll be an Israeli national without Israeli citizenship, whatever it is. But right, Jewish is not the right citizenship. Israeli is a citizenship. Israeli is a nationality. Jew is not a nationality. And the court ruled it's not true. The court said, and I quote, this is Uzi Vogelman, he just recently retired, I think a year ago, from Israel's Supreme Court. This is what he said, listen to this. The appellants argue, for example, that it is impossible to define the whole of world Jewry as belonging to the Jewish nation, for the Jews are all of the nationality of states of which they are citizens. I agree with that. You agree with that, okay? We are dealing with an issue that is sensitive and controversial on the moral level and the historical level, and one which has been accompanying the Jewish people for many years and the Zionist movement from its inception. And here's the money quote. The conception that Judaism is not only a religious affiliation, but also a national affiliation is the foundation stone of Zionism. And they cannot make an Israeli nationality because then what's going to be? There'll be some Israeli nationals in Israel, Jewish nationals in Israel, and that will fracture the nation. And then they added this. They have a political motive for this too. Quote, the president, that's the head of the court, they call him the president. The president added that in his view, the principle of the right to national self-determination, now we're talking about Israel's rights for the Jews to have self-determination, was intended to apply to nations and not to fragments of nations. In his opinion, recognition of such nationality, meaning Israeli nationality, might lead to national social fragmentation of the entire nation. The president added that separatist trend of splitting the Jewish people was unacceptable, meaning Zionism believes that the Jews are a nation like the Kurds, with a flag, with a national anthem, anything that nations identify as such because of, and nowadays it's usually land, language, culture, flag, national anthem, things like that. They provided to the Jews in order to transform them into one of these. And because nations have a right to self-determination, not fragments of nations, the Zionists could not come to Israel and say, the Zionists have a right to self-determination, or some Jews want self-determination. No, Zionism has to be the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. Otherwise, they have no right to self-determination. They're just some Jews that want self-determination. The Jews are a nationality. Israel is the state of that nationality.
Okay, so let me ask you, you talk about that, you mentioned the quote a few times about Israel is to the Jews what Germany is to Germans, whatever you said, right? So can Israel as a state say they represent the Jewish people as an ethno-religion, but just that they were founded, let me finish this, and then but that they were just founded later on, so the Germans were founded and then they had, German people, but that they were founded, but the Jews were already spread around the world, but they represent Judaism as an ethno-religion.
Why? What right do they have to say they represent me?
If the majority of people support something, why can't they say...
The majority of people support what? Tell me what they support. Do they support, the majority of people support the idea that Israel is their country?
That Israel, that is their country, and the fact that they will one day want to claim it. Yes, yes.
As Japan is to the Japanese, Israel is to them.
In many ways, a lot of Jewish people say, yes, they would like to claim that one day, and yes.
No, not one day. That's not what they say. They don't say that Israel, one day, that all Jews, the doors of Israel is open to the Jews. And therefore, we are a asset to the Jews, in the sense that a receivable is an asset from an accounting perspective, or that we are a service provider to the Jews, or that we are a potential country of the Jews. That is not what any of these things are saying. They are saying that the Jews' identity is a nationality.
Let me ask you, at what point can you say you represent someone?
If you were elected, or you have authority.
No, so let's say, at what point can Israel say they represent the Jews? Does it have to be 50%?
They can't. What does that mean? They can't. At what point do they say they can represent black-haired people? What do you mean at what point?
So if 85% of Jews live in Israel, can they say they represent
Then they
Jews?
represent 85% of Jews. I don't understand. They represent their citizens. I don't understand. Even explain this to me. Every country represents their citizens, and only to the extent that a country does. What they're saying over here is not that, well, 85% of the Jews live in Israel, therefore we represent all Jews. No country does that, by the way. If, let's say, 85% of Mexicans live in Mexico, and some Mexicans left, first of all, they're not Mexicans anymore, right? But let's assume that they define Mexican as anybody that hates Mexicans, the way Herzl defines Jews.
Yeah, but they don't do that nowadays.
They no longer represent them. If my country, United States of America, we used to be your country. We broke off in 1776, right? Every single person, not every, most of the people here came from somewhere in the last couple hundred years. Poland, Hungary, Germany, Australia, Africa, wherever. Poland no longer represents me. I'm an American. Israel represents the Israelis. That's it. How in the world do they represent someone who's not their citizen?
Well, they don't say they represent you as a person.
Yes, they do.
So let me ask you a question. If something happened to you, something happened to you, would they suddenly claim that Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro is our citizen and we have to protect him?
Not citizen, nationality, and they do. They do say that they are responsible for the welfare
every
and
Jew in the world.
What?
Of every Jew in the world?
Yes, they do that.
They legally say that?
Yes, it is. Israel is responsible in much Zionist literature that Israel is responsible for it's in the Jerusalem program. Go Google Jerusalem
legality,
program.
not in the literature. I'm saying legality and practically. Do they actually say
legality? See, it's a contradiction. You're right. Legally, Israel is an absurdity because just even the definition of Jew is an absurdity. They claim to be the state of the Jews, but they don't have this law that says they're the nation state of all Jews all over the world, has no jurisdiction over anybody outside of the Israelis. This law that Israel is not the state of its citizens, it's the state of a nationality. And if you're not Jewish, the 2018 nation state law says you have no self-determination rights in Israel because Israel's not the state of the Jews. Let me give you some examples of how Israel says they represent all the Jews. So first, Theodore Herzl, it started with him in his book, The Jewish State.
No, but all these quotes, I'm talking about literally and legally and practically.
Legally, Israel claims is practically Israel's a liability for the Jewish people, although they claim to represent them and to speak in their name.
So if something would happen to you, would they say it is our right to save you?
If something anti-Semitism all over the world, they will say, like the Ethiopian Jews, for example, this is where they said it, where they airlifted them. That's an example of how Israel claims to be responsible, not legally, they don't have to.
Well, can you give an example, explain what exactly happened?
Oh, any time there's anti-Semitism somewhere in the world, is Netanyahu comes. I'll give you an example. In France, Netanyahu, when there was that attack in France about 10 years ago in Copenhagen, Netanyahu came to France. I'm here, the Jewish state. They always mix in to all wherever they can, incidents of anti-Semitism all over the world. They claim in their literature that they are responsible to make sure Jews all over the world are safe. It's not a law, but they do say that they are the country of the Jews. And you're asking me, how do Jews actually benefit in real life from that?
Yeah, I'm asking you, practically, you might say they do this, but practically and legally, do they actually save and protect all the Jews in the world?
Well,
like, if something would happen to you, would they try and do something?
No.
Because then they don't represent all the Jews.
No. You're saying two different things. I'm saying they say they represent the Jews, meaning they speak in the name of the Jews. They speak for the Jews. They are the representatives of the Jews. Now, you're asking me, well, do they actually protect Jews? My answer is they don't. They actually
I'm
don't.
talking about outside Israel, not inside Israel. I'm sure I'll get to that later.
I'm talking about, I agree with you.
Yeah.
They claim to be our representatives. They claim to act in our name. Yet we gain nothing. We don't even have a right to vote. Israel is a liability to the Zionism, rather, is a liability to Jews all over the world, because Israel claims to represent the Jews. Israel claims to be my country. And in that sense, it causes me a lot of problems, and I will list them for you shortly. One of which is the anti-Semitism caused by Israel's actions, where people blame Jews.
We'll get to that later, because I disagree with you. We'll get to that later.
Fine. Yeah. But no, they do not give anything in return for the claim to represent me. But they do claim the right, not the responsibility. You sound like Uncle Ben, and you're right, that with great power comes great responsibility. Israel says, we represent the Jews, we have rights, but we don't have any responsibilities, at least legally. So, for example, I'll give you a whole list.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the quotes and wondering how, actually, instead of just looking at the quotes, legally, does it matter?
No, legally, you mean, can I tell Israel, you're obligated to protect me? No, I can't. But I can tell them, you're obligated to take me in.
So that just shows us a difference between Israel and Judaism. And we would all agree, I think most people would agree, that Israel is separate from Judaism.
Is it separate from Jewish identity?
No, well, Israel as a state represents a lot, Jewish people, but it is not Judaism.
What do you represents Jewish people? In what sense do they represent?
I know we're going around in circles, but
I'm just asking you a question. The people in your parliament represent you, meaning you elected them. They make laws. They speak for you. Yes. Israel claims to speak for the Jewish people. By what right do they do that? Nothing.
Well, like I said, I think intrinsically Judaism and Zionism are separate.
You're telling me that Israel, you're giving me separations. I'm asking you one question.
Yeah.
In what way does Israel represent the Jewish people?
In a way that most Jews, first of all, there's a huge majority of Jewish people that actually reside in Israel. So once you represent,
a huge majority of people do not reside in Israel. Most Jews reside outside of Israel.
Well, are you talking about Orthodox Jews or all Jews altogether? Orthodox Jews or all Jews altogether?
Jews. Well, there's not a huge majority of Jews in Israel.
How many Jews are there in the world?
How many Jews?
16 million.
Get you the latest numbers in a second.
I thought it was around 16 million. Israel has around 9 million people, minus around 2 million.
So that's
Israeli
certainly
Arabs.
Not a huge majority based on what you just said.
45%, I would say, is a big majority.
45%, not a huge majority, but a plurality does.
That's a very big majority. Yeah.
Fine. So they represent their citizens like all other countries do. In what way do they represent me and you? Just explain that.
Well, I mean, this is going on a bit later, but if something would happen, would you run there? Would you run there for that protection?
That doesn't mean even if that's true, that doesn't mean they represent us. That means they're a service provider for us. Blue Cross Blue Shield, or whatever your health insurance is, or whatever your hospital is, or a bomb shelter that you have in your country, or the closest police station.
We've got public health in our country. We're good. We're good. We have public health.
Okay, whatever it is. That doesn't mean they represent you. We're talking about representation means they speak for you, not they provide you with a service. Policemen provide you with a service. Your policemen do not represent you. If some danger were to befall you wherever you live in England, you would run to let's say your big brother who owns a gun. He doesn't represent you. He is a protection for you. The president's bodyguards don't represent him. Israel, so you're not giving any reason why, and there is none, that Israel should represent me. You're saying it provides a service for me. Should I avail myself to it? They provide a service for me. That's not representation. So when Netanyahu comes to America in order to speak to our Congress to try to squelch Barack Obama's Iran nuclear deal, if you remember that. So before he left, he said, and I quote, "I come not only as a representative of the people who elected me and the people of my country, I come representing all Jews all over the world." Now, that's a lie. He does not represent all Jews all over the world. Second, when our
Well, by the way, if he's talking about ensuring the safety of Israel, I think he does have the support of all Jews in the world.
He didn't say, I have that my policy of defeating this Iran.
Mentioned us talking about a certain policy.
He did not say.
I thought he went in to talk about a certain policy, though.
He went in to say he represents all Jews all over the world as the Prime Minister of Israel.
Just before that, did he talk about a certain policy? And he said this as a policy.
No. That's not what he said. And besides, is it true that he represents all the Jews? There were no Jews that disagreed with him? And even the majority of Jews. Do you know that the majority of Jews agreed with him? Yes or no? We don't know that. Certainly not all Jews. He does not represent all Jews. If you were to get up there, perhaps you agree with him and say, I here represent not the opinion of Eli Hassell, but I represent all Jews all over the world. They would laugh in your face. He has no more right to say that than you, even if many Jews agree with his policy. When Barack Obama referred to Netanyahu as a coward using a nasty colloquialism, he called him a chicken blank. Naftali Bennett, who was then Minister of Education, later became a Prime Minister. He said, insulting Netanyahu is not merely insulting the Prime Minister of Israel. Netanyahu is not merely the Prime Minister of Israel, he is the Prime Minister of all the Jews all over the world. And therefore, for insulting Netanyahu is insulting all the Jews.
I think you ask the average Jew, they would disagree with that.
But you're right. So you're saying that the average Jew is, in a sense, anti-Zionist. But that's
no. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the average Jew supports Israel in the sense that they might want to go there, they might want to move there. They love Israel. They will financially support. They would count themselves maybe as one, but they are separate. Not as one. Sorry. Not as one. No, I'll take that. But that's not the right wording.
Exactly. But what you're saying does not defend any of the above, because they're going way beyond that. They're saying Israel's...
I don't need to agree with all the politics. They could be wrong.
Fine, but you're not agreeing with politics. This is Zionism from Herzl down to today. As you heard, their Supreme Court Justice said that the cornerstone of Zionism is that the Jews are a national identity. And the 2018 nation-state law said Israel is their country. The reason why anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, according to them, is because just as you cannot have France, cannot have French people without France, you cannot have Jews without Israel. It's an identity thing. It's all over Zionist literature from Herzl till today. That's Zionism. If you agree with that, if you disagree with that, good. Then you're an anti-Zionist like me. You want Israel to be a nationality. Look, let me ask you something. Would you want Israel to be a nationality and get rid of this Jewish nationality?
Explain what you mean by that. Would you want Israel to not be Jewish?
Right, Jewish is a religion. You're Jewish, right? You're British.
Yeah.
In Israel, according to Israel, Israel is not the country of all its citizens. Israel is the country of the Jews in the self-determination sense, in the 2018 nation-state law.
Explain what you mean by that in the self-determination sense.
Okay, self-determination means the right to govern yourself, which means only Jews have the right to govern themselves in the state of Israel. Because
in which way? Because the Druze and Muslim community is self-governed in some sense. They do. They have, for personal matters, they have their own courts.
Who has their own courts?
So there's the Muslim community, the Druze community, they have their own courts for personal matters.
Oh, sure. In America, we have Jewish courts for our own personal matters too.
No, that's not legally backed, is it?
Well, it is a binding arbitration technically.
But that's personal, religious-wise, but that's not legally binding.
Right. No, but what that means, the 2018 nation-state law means that, let's say in theory that the non-Jews, meaning combination Christians, Muslims, Hindus, whoever,
Jews, sure,
would become a majority, and the Jews would become a minority. Now the Jews are being governed by non-Jews. That cannot happen in Israel.
Because it's a Jewish state,
only Jews have a right to govern themselves. Non-Jews cannot govern Jews in Israel.
Do you mean only a Jewish person can become prime minister?
No. I mean that the non-Jewish people can become whatever they want so long as they're a minority. but non-Jews cannot govern over Jews in Israel, because in Israel only Jews have a right to govern themselves.
That's what every country wants, doesn't it? It wants like Japanese. They would want a majority of Japanese to be in that country.
You mean citizens? No. Yeah. I'm not saying a majority of Japanese in that country. What I'm saying, in the United States of America, the majority rules, whether the majority is Jewish or black or white or Christian or whatever, right?
But you mean by rules by having the voting?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
In Israel, the majority, if the majority is non-Jewish and they now majority rules, let's say, right, one person, one vote, what that would mean is that non-Jews are ruling over Jews in Israel. That's illegal.
If they would vote for other parties, if they vote for non-Jewish parties,
in theory, birth rate, okay, or however it ends up that way, that's illegal. And the reason is because Israel's the country of the Jews, not the country of the Israelis. Israel is the nation state of the Jewish nation. And although you could be an Israeli citizen, Israel is not designed to be the country of the Israeli citizens. It's designed to be the country of the Jewish nationality.
I think it's pretty clear they represent Jews from the beginning, from 1948.
There's two things. When they say they represent the Jews, that means if you're not a Jew in Israel, although you have individual civil rights, you do not have a right to become a majority and rule over the Jews. That's different than England and America or any democratic country. But the second thing, which is relevant to me more than anything else, relevant to my religion, is that Israel not only claims that only a certain group of people have a right to rule this country, but that country is the country of a nationality of which I am one of. And that is, again, it's an attack on my religion, on my Jewish identity, because it wishes to transform it into a national one. And that started historically, this is in all the Zionist history books, this started with Gretz, and they literally set out to say, let's change the identity of the Jews. And they claim to speak for the Jews. Theodore Herzl, in his book, The Jewish State, invoked ancient Roman law called Negotiorium Gestio. If you Google Negotiorium Gestio, that's with a G, Herzl, this will come up. He said, this is a law that if there's a piece of chattel sitting around in danger with nobody to manage it, anybody passing by can legally become the gestor, meaning the manager of that piece of chattel, and speak for it. And the Jews, since they don't have anybody to speak for them, the Zionists have a legal right to speak for the Jews. In the 1950s, Ben-Gurion had a big fight with a guy, Jacob Blaustein, of the American Jewish Congress, I think it was American Jewish Committee, maybe, where Israel said they represent all the Jews all over the world. And he sent Ben-Gurion a letter saying that, quote, well, actually, this was a letter from Joseph Proskauer from the AJC, writing a letter to Ben-Gurion. Quote, obviously, people like myself cannot be expected to ask for American contributions to funds intended, in part, to achieve such an un-American aim as the emigration of all American Jews to Israel. Nor can we sit silent under the attacks that will follow shortly, unless the situation is corrected. I implore you to issue a statement modifying your position and categorically disclaiming any intention on the part of the State of Israel to interfere with the life of American Jewry. Ben-Gurion sent back a letter because in those days, Israel was not strong enough to stand up to American Zionist Jewry.
What year was this?
1950. In August 1950, Ben-Gurion wrote a letter back, and I quote, the Jews of the United States as a community and as individuals have only one political attachment, and that is to the United States of America. They owe no political allegiance to Israel. The State of Israel represents and speaks only on behalf of its own citizens, and in no way presumes to represent or speak in the name of Jews who are citizens of any other country. Of course, they had no intention of keeping their word. In March 9th, 1960, Moshe Dayan said in Canada, quote, his government should not only represent the people of Israel, but the interests of all Jews. Foreign minister, then she was Golda Meir, later to become prime minister. Her reply to the delegation of the Anglo-Jewish Association, which resulted in the startling headlines in the Jewish National Post of April 15th, 1960, quote, Israel will continue to speak for Jewry. All right. They do this till this day. Till Netanyahu, till the Zionists. This is the cornerstone of Zionism. That just like my president, whether I like him or not, speaks for me as an American, and my governor, whether I like her or not, speaks for me as a New Yorker, Israel, as the nation state of all Jews, speaks for its, not citizens, I guess you can call it constituents.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's wrong wording, but can you not say, why can't Israel be the nation state, which means, just to make sure we define words, but it means heavily, run by Jews, or like demographic, well, however you want to call it, but run by Jews. So can Israel not be the nation state of the Jewish people, an ethnic religion?
It's not a nation state of me. I'm a Jew.
No, it's not you. Let me finish what I'm saying.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So a bit like Germans are for the Germany is for the Germans, but Israel was made for the nation state of the Jewish people. But the Jewish people are all congregated around the world. But is made for them. Now you might say, you, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, say, I don't want any affiliation towards it. I am not using my right of return. But anyone in the ethnic religion can use their right of return.
They can say that, but that's not what they say, and that's not what Zionism is. You're saying that you don't like what Zionism is currently. You don't like Israel currently. You don't like how Israel defines the Jewish state currently. You want that abolished and replaced with something that is not really well worded, because the nation state of somebody means not merely you provide them a service, but even if you want to define nation state,
it's heavily run by Jews, and yes, nation state.
If you want to say that, you want to say in your definition it must be run by Jews. What if a non-Jews become the majority?
Well, it's no longer a nation state of Jews, isn't it?
Okay, so you're saying that what Israel happens to be a nation state run by a majority of Jews. In that sense, England is the nation state of the whites, because it's run by mostly white people, right? It's a majority.
Well, it's run by English people, isn't it?
Well, one second. And Israel's run by Israeli people, isn't it?
Heavily majority Jewish.
Majority white in England.
Sure, you can say that they're run by white people.
Exactly. So your definition of a Jewish state is a state that happens today to be run by Jews. If that's true, you could say that England is a state that happens to be run by whites, which it is, in the same sense.
You're saying that you could call it a white country?
You can, but that's not what Israel wants. That's not what Zionism, from Herzl to Jabotinsky to Ben Gurion all the way to Netanyahu, that's not what they claim Zionism is. That's not what their own Supreme Court defines Zionism as. You could say, and you are saying, you don't like Zionism the way it is. You want to redefine Israel as a state that provides services for the Jews, happens to be now run by Jews, in all probability will continue to be run by Jews, especially since they don't plan on annexing the West Bank and all the millions of non-Jews anytime soon. Fine, but that's not Zionism. You want to invent Hasselstan. That's your country.
Oh, it already exists.
It does?
No.
Okay. You can invent your own, that's fine, but you're saying that you're against Zionism as defined by the Zionists, as defined by Israel, as it stands today. I can continue. In terms of the trouble that Israel makes for Jews outside. Look, I'm a religious Jew. You look like a religious Jew too. And you understand that Judaism, the religion, is very important to us. I'm here on your show, and I gladly announce to all your viewers that I would give my life for my religion when and if my religion says I must. Absolutely. Okay. It is very important to me. It is my lifestyle, and I identify first and foremost as a Jew. It is the most important part of my life. As you know, our theology says we are put in this world to serve God, right? Very simple. And therefore, when I find a statement like this, just imagine, just tell me how it's possible, how any Jew for whom all of the above applies, and according to Judaism it does to all of us, should not oppose an ideology that says the following. This is from a journal, Jewish Political Studies Review, spring 2008. It's talking about how to make more Jews into Zionists and okay. Talking about the birthright program and things like that. Lastly, Jews and Americans is by Stephen Baim. He's one of the big Zionist thought leaders. Lastly, Jews and Americans alike need to understand the centrality of Israel to the identification of Jews as Jews. The centrality of Israel to the identification of Jews as Jews. Again, not just if you want it, it's available. If something bad happens, you can run there. It's centrality with the broader Jewish people, given both the place of Zion in Jewish history and thought, and, quote, the transformations in Jewish tradition wrought by Zionism. The American Jewish-Israeli relationship cannot rest solely on strategic interests, or even for that matter, shared values. Instead, the relationship rests on being a Jew and being part of the Jewish people in the 21st century. In that sense, denying the Jews opportunity to support Israel is to not deny them the opportunity to be themselves. Now, you could support Israel all you want.
But who said that?
Stephen Bain. That's the article in a journal. Now, here I have in front of me.
Who's Stephen Bain?
He's a Bain with an M. He's a big Zionist thought leader. Zionists have think tanks and Hasbara ministry.
Like every country does, yeah.
Right. That what?
Like every country does.
America doesn't have a ministry of propaganda.
Yeah. Well, they've got media. They've got media there.
But it's different because the Zionist Hasbara actually goes very far out of its way to teach the average person how to do Hasbara. I actually have two publications of theirs in front of me. This one is for March 2002, called the Hasbara Handbook, Promoting Israel on Campus. And this one was written by a famous guy, Frank Luntz. He's a big political consultant, I guess. Israel Project's 2009 Global Language Dictionary, and it tells you how promoting Israel on campus. And it gives you, it tells you like, things like if you say peace more often than the next guy, you'll probably win the argument. Don't bring religion into this because Americans, that's what it's talking about, don't like to hear about religious affiliations of a country, etc. But at the beginning of this publication, I saw an amazing thing. The first page, it's called Hasbara Handbook.
But wait a second, does this quote matter at all? Is it just is this legal? Is this... What does this actually matter?
This is Zionist education, meaning...
Is this taught in schools?
Yes, it is taught in schools and in Hasbara fellowships and various different courses and given out to people.
So this is given to every student in Israel?
No, not at all. No, not students. This is a specialized thing for people who are given a Hasbara job, meaning here in New York, you can get Hasbara fellowships. If you look it up,
Hasbara is what, an Israeli job?
No. Hasbara, as you know, in Hebrew, literally means explanation, but it means propaganda in Israeli parlance. It's a skill that they teach you based on, propaganda.
That's about Israel.
How to defend Israel, okay?
From Israel, yeah. Okay.
So now, one of the, especially on campus, right? So, this is, how long ago is this? 2002. Listen to this. The reluctance of Jewish students to get behind Israel unconditionally is probably connected to the gradual shift in our generation towards attempting to find personal meaning in Judaism. This means that if you find personal meaning in Judaism, as I do, and not all these people are Orthodox, most of them aren't. I don't know what their personal meaning is. The prophets, Tikkun Olam, or whatever these guys believe Judaism is, right? Doesn't matter. But if they find personal meaning, they therefore are less attached to Israel. Israel depends upon not merely the political support of the world because they're right and the Jews want maybe to run to Israel one day. It's an identity thing. The more Jews find a type of Judaism that doesn't involve Israel, the less likely they are to unconditionally support Israel. It's very simple. Many people, many Jews I know, will unconditionally support their religion, right? That's the way it works. People unconditionally support Israel for the same reason that people unconditionally support their religion. It's part of their identity. It's part of who they are. If somebody says something bad about Israel, it's like saying something bad about you as a Jew. And so it elicits this Pavlovian reaction, the same way somebody would insult your mother. They insult your motherland. Do you know how in Israel, how in Hebrew they say homeland? In English, people say Israel's our homeland. Now, homeland, the word in English, doesn't say much about what a homeland is, but in other languages, it does. In French, la patria, fatherland. There's Mother Russia, which I forgot how to pronounce in Russian. And in Israel, moledet. It's the place you were born. And indeed, in Israel's Declaration of Independence, it says, all the way at the beginning, here the Jewish people were born. And there's
You're talking about historically through the Mount Sinai and
not
like
exactly. It's a contradiction to Mount Sinai and etc. In fact, you were in Israel ever?
I was in Israel this week, yes.
Okay, you were in Jerusalem?
Well, a couple of months ago, yeah, sure.
Okay, I have to tell you something, and I'm very proud of my son. I'm going to mention this. He went to study in Israel, as many Orthodox Jews do. In Brisk, he was, by Reb David. And it's an anti-Zionist school in the heart of Jerusalem. And
isn't that ironic, by the way? An anti-Zionist school right in the heart of Jerusalem.
Well, they were there before Israel was. You see, that's the thing. Israel is the Holy Land. They superimposed Israel on the Holy Land. They superimposed Zionism on Jewish identity. That's exactly the thing. It's not ironic at all.
They're criticizing Israel as a state and its existence, and they're reaping the benefits of it at the same time.
They're not reaping the benefits. Yeah, sure. No problem. Nobody, according to them, let Israel not be there and let them not reap the benefits. No problem. Nobody asked them. You know, that's like, I want to tell you something. It's like Israel's reaping more benefits of the religious Jews than the religious Jews are of Israel. But that's another discussion because Israel needs to be able to say they represent the Jews. They're the Jewish state. And if the Orthodox Jews, the religious Jews, the Jews who are perceived by the world as the more Jewy Jews, right, say we don't recognize Israel, we don't even want to live here, Israel has a problem. They don't want that. They want the Orthodox Jews there. They want them there. Okay, they want to turn them into Zionists, but they want them there. Rabbi Soloveitchik, he's not alive anymore.
They want all Jews there, just to be clear.
What?
They want all Jews there.
Well, you know what? They officially do. I don't know if that would even be better for Zionism, because without AIPAC in America, without the lobby in England, I think Israel would be worse off than it is now. So if I was a Zionist, I would not want all Jews in Israel, unless the evangelicals take over. But I would certainly want Jews outside of Israel to do stuff like Hasbara. But Israel is saying so my son, after he lands in Israel, like within 24 hours, he calls me, right? The first call. He says to me, Tati, that's daddy in, Yiddish. He says, Tati, you have no idea. The brainwashing here is crazy about Zionist brainwashing. I said, what did you see in one day? Now he's in Jerusalem, right? And they're using a map to get their bearings, right? Now, the majority of the streets in Jerusalem are named after Jewish personalities, either biblical ones, all the prophets, right? Maimonides, Sadia, all of these, or Zionist, non-Orthodox ones. There's Herzl Street, Jabotinsky Street, right, etc. Tell me, Eli, did you ever notice a Moses Street in Jerusalem? It's not there. Abraham. No. Isn't that funny?
Oh, no, maybe it is. I genuinely don't know any of the streets.
There's none. Check on Google Earth. Isaac, Jacob, they're not there. There's one Haredi community that you can check it up on Google Earth. They built a community and they have 4 streets right next to each other, Sarah, Rivka, Rochaleah, the matriarchs. But the streets, they don't have it. They do have the children of Jacob, Reuven, Shimon, and Yehuda.
Just to be clear, that's only because the leadership of Israel isn't religious.
Wait, no, but they have many religious people. What are you talking about? They have every biblical, the streets start from Bin Nun, from Joshua down. They have every
What's
biblical.
the issue? What's the issue then? That's not saying
Because Jewish history starts with Joshua because he led the Jews into Israel. Gretz's history of the Jews starts with Joshua.
like I said, that's only because of the leadership of Israel. That is not a religious leadership.
100%. That's what I'm saying. The brainwashing of Zionism is that the Jews were born in Israel. That's the point. Israel
you can't blame that there's a leadership issue.
I'm blaming Zionism because this is Zionism. The Declaration of Independence of Israel says here the Jewish nation was born. Moledet means homeland. If you say Israel, Moledet means the place you were born. In nationalist philosophy, there is some type of organic, even romantic, German vitalist maybe connection between a nationality, a people, and the place they were born. And that's what fatherlands, motherlands, that's what it means. Israel is Moledet. It means the birthplace of the Jewish people. And that's why if a Jew believes this, that if somebody insults your mother or your father, you're going to punch them before you think whether his insult is true. That's human nature. And if somebody insults your motherland or fatherland, you will do the same thing. So this is what they're saying for college students to unconditionally support Israel. They need to tie their Judaism, not to their own personal Judaism, not even to God, but to the state of Israel. And the more they do that, the more they will unconditionally support Israel. So
this quotes that you mentioned, by the way, is this on Israel's website? Does Israel give it out, or is this an independent?
No, actually, they're leaked because it says on one of these things not to be given out. Here, the property of the Israel project, not for distribution or publication, for example.
Is that Israel's? Does that mean it's Israel's government? They give it out, or is it an independent organization?
People who are so I think they're
because if it's an independent organization, it just doesn't make a difference.
NGOs, yes, but this all matches Zionism. It's Israel's Declaration of Independence. This is their professional assessment, their professional assessors to decide how to get people to support Israel. I'm not blaming all of Israel because of what it says in this book. What I am telling you is that what it says here, what Israel's Declaration of Independence says, what Theodore Herzl wrote in his Jewish state book, what he told Major Evans Gordon, what Netanyahu says in his books, what Ben Gurion said, what Israel's Supreme Court says on the Venn diagram, all match in what's called Zionism. And that means the Jews are a nationality and Israel is the state of that nationality, the birthplace of the Jews. The birthplace of the Jews. That's Israel. I'm just giving you examples of the subliminal and various other propaganda tactics that they use to convince Jews of this. And just like Netanyahu says, if you're against the existence of Israel for whatever reason, you're against the existence of the Jews.
Well, I think a lot of people would agree with that. I mean, you can be against Israel as a political reason you might believe Nakba or whatever different belief system. That doesn't mean you're against Jews.
But that's not, then you're against Zionism, at least as it manifests today.
You're against Zionism, you're not against Judaism. They are separate.
You're preaching to the choir. Okay? Of course.
No, I'll tell you what. You go to the average person in Israel, you ask them, is Zionism Judaism? They'll say no.
No, that's not true.
You're 100% sure.
That's not true. Is Zionism, Judaism, the religion? They will probably say no. However,
it is true.
However, what they will say is, and I'm sure you've seen this all over the place, that Zionism is an inherent part of Judaism. Your chief rabbi said that.
The Rabbi Mervis.
Yes, your chief rabbi Mervis said that. Is he still chief rabbi?
It's one of them. I don't know.
Okay, your chief rabbi said that. That Zionism is an inherent part of Judaism. Religious Zionists, Orthodox Jewish Zionists say that. The settlers all say that. They're willing to. There are all sorts of different Zionisms, but the religious Jewish Zionists, most of them will tell you that Being a Zionist is an inherent part of Judaism. Next year in Judah, how many times have you heard that whoever's against Zionism is against Judaism? We say 3 times a day.
I've never heard that.
You've never heard that.
That if you're against Zionism, you're against Judaism. No,
That's
never.
what Netanyahu said. That's what Israel's website says.
It doesn't mean the people in Israel agree with Netanyahu.
What?
Everything. It doesn't mean everyone agrees with it.
That's fine. So what you're saying, I mean, unless you find me a survey, my anecdotal experience will disagree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine everyone saying, or many people in Israel saying that Zionism is Judaism.
Is Judaism?
I'm saying I don't think many people would say that. Yes.
You don't think many people would say that Zionism is an inherent part of Judaism, that Judaism requires you to be a Zionist?
Well, that's slightly separate, but Judaism requires you to be Zionist.
No, I understand that
they're only religious. By the way, I only think the religious people would say that.
No, I got that. So the religious, the Haredim, they would say that Zionism is the opposite of Judaism. But
I don't think the non-religious people will say Zionism is inherent to Judaism.
Well, because they don't believe in Judaism, but they would say Zionism is inherent to Jewish identity.
Okay, that's separate, isn't it?
No, it's not separate because
Judaism and Jewish identity is separate.
No. That's true. But so let's understand what we're all agreeing on. Is Judaism a religion? If you're not religious, you don't care about it, and you don't think Zionism has to do with it. You don't care. It's over. But Zionism, if you're a religious Zionist, like the settlers, for example, and many others who aren't settlers, like your chief rabbi, you will say that Judaism requires you to be a Zionist. If you are a non-religious Zionist Jew in Israel, you will say that we'll say even worse, that Judaism isn't Zionism, but Judaism isn't even what makes you Jewish. It's being Zionism is a large part of what makes you Jewish. Shimon Peres said when they had, they had in Israel a gigantic fight in the Knesset in Ben Gurion's days, Mi Yehudi, who was a Jew, regarding the law of return. And Shimon Peres recently meaning I think 5-10 years ago was when Rabbi Ovadia Yosef died. So there was he said something about Rabbi Ovadia, and he was quoted there as saying, and in Hamodia magazine also he was quoted, that a Jew is not somebody whose mother is Jewish. A Jew is somebody who lives in Israel, sends his children to the army, fights for Israel, and if the rabbis tell us what a Jew is, I think we're going to tell them what a rabbi is. So we're talking about Israel, as I said at the beginning, is a new version of Jewish identity. Now, to me, without Judaism, there are no Jews. Judaism makes Jews.
I think everyone would agree with that. The ethnicity and then everything, religion, all tied together.
Judaism is not an ethnicity.
Why not?
Because tell me how me, you, Ivanka Trump, Ethiopian Jews, Yemenite Jews, Russian Jews are of one ethnicity. Ashkenazi Jews have an ethnicity. There's no cultural connection. There's no any connection between Jews at all, except for 2 things. Even not. There's only one thing. The only connection between Jews is that they're
the religious commandments.
That's it.
But that's only in Orthodox Judaism, by the way.
I'm sorry, what?
That's only in Orthodox Judaism.
Oh, no, I believe, and you believe, that even non-religious Jews have commanded also.
No, I'm talking about if you're talking about what is a Jew.
I agree. So you asked one of these.
Judaism would disagree, yeah.
So you asked one of these people who you probably have. I have many times. I wrote about in my book. Tell me what a Jew is. And what you're in search of now, what determines whether you're Jewish? What you're in search of is a characteristic or many, whatever you want, that if you have this characteristic, you're Jewish. If you don't, you're not. Simple as that.
I mean, I think okay, sure. Yeah.
I say it's the commandments. Ethnicity implies some sort, as you said before, some common culture, language, something. But if you have a Sephardi Jew in Yemen, that's, let's say, not religious, and he sits on the floor on a carpet with an earring and a turban, smoking a hookah. He speaks Arabic, right? And not only that,
what ties him together is Judaism.
But he doesn't believe in Judaism.
So let me ask you, Sikhism, how is Sikhism an ethno-religion?
I don't know if it is, and
It
I
is,
don't.
according to UK government.
Okay,
I
I don't know
knew you were
enough.
going to bring this up, so I
I
said,
don't know, but I don't know about. I don't know enough about Sikhism to
that's
answer. But
well,
but
all of it's confusing. You can't just
no,
discount
it's
one
not
without all
confusing.
of them.
It's not confusing. It's not confusing. Here, let me ask you something.
No,
Again, I know nothing about the Sikhs, but let me ask you, okay?
sure.
Do all the Sikhs have common language, dress, food, songs, style, something like that?
I
The
would think
answer
so,
has,
but no, but in terms of, I think that if it, I mean, I don't know all the facts, so I don't think I should talk about it much, to be honest.
well, so I just asked my artificial intelligence what makes Sikhism an ethno-religion. This is okay, perplexity. Sikhism is often debated as an ethno-religion due to its close association with
By the way, it's
Punjabi.
not debated. The UK government officially calls it an
Fine,
ethno-religion.
okay.
Yeah.
Its association with Punjabi culture, language, and history. While Sikhism's one cultural origin. Sikhism originated in the Punjab region of India and is deeply intertwined with Punjabi culture and language. Okay, two, many Sikhs see their identity as ethnic. This is reflected in practices like shared surnames, Singh and Kaur, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, which were introduced to challenge caste distinctions, but became markers of a distinct Sikh identity. In the Sikh diaspora, the community often maintains cultural practices such as Punjabi language, which can make Sikhism
What
appear more
happens
ethnic than.
if you don't keep to those practices? Would you not still be counted as Sikh?
I'm sorry?
If you
Let
don't follow those cultural practices, I mean, listen, we're going off ChatGPT, so maybe we
but
shouldn't
the
do too much
Jews have
into it.
no culture in common. They have no culture, no language, no nothing in common.
I mean, I agree. I think what ties it all together is Judaism as a faith, as a
Exactly,
religion.
but that's not an ethno-religion, that's a religion. That means that whether somebody believes it or not, he's the only reason why he's a Jew, that he's connected to me. A German non-religious Jew who's married to a Christian who went to University of Berlin and celebrates Christmas, or a guy like Theodore Herzl, right, who celebrated Christmas. What makes these guys Jewish? Only
Well,
because
let me ask you a question. How are some countries, let's say German, Japanese, an ethnicity, and some countries like Iran not an ethnicity?
well, I'll tell you, this is not my.
What I'm trying to say is basically,
No,
it's all
so
really confusing. It's
no,
not.
wait. If it is confusing, then you have no right to say the Jews are an ethno-religion, because you could say it's confusing and I don't know what it means, but you have no right to decide
I'm not
that, okay,
deciding. I'm just
I
following
know,
what
but you have no right to say that it is. It doesn't make sense to say it's confusing. We don't understand what it means.
you're saying.
But
We shouldn't talk about ethnicity at all.
no, I'm the opposite. I'm saying talk about it, but no matter how you're going to define it and what parameters you're going to give, the Jews do not fit in. What I'm saying is the Jews have zero in common, except for the fact that they're commanded to fulfill the command. And if you don't believe that, all Jews have zero in common.
Mm-hmm.
The Arabic Jews, even when they speak Hebrew, they speak it with an Arabic accent, right? We Ashkenazim do not have a W sound in our Hebrew alphabet. They do. Their music, the Jewish music of the Jews of Yemen and Syria, are Arabic sounding. I can't make out the difference between a Jewish with the Hebrew words, a Yemenite song about Rabbi Sholem Sharabi. There actually is such a song, versus a Arabic song. Our food is not the same. They never heard of gefilte fish and cholent. They eat, I know, this Sephardic food. They have no cultural, ethnic, nothing in common. You may as well call left-handed people an ethnicity, which doesn't make sense. At least they have something physical in common. Ivanka Trump and her children are Jewish. They have nothing in common with the Ethiopian Jew. Nothing, zero. Nothing cultural, nothing linguistic, nothing. If you look up any ethno-religion or any ethno-anything, you're going to find stuff like language, culture. The Jews do not share that. If you want to make Ashkenazi Jews an ethno-religion, just Ashkenazim, maybe. If you want to make Jews that live in the Upper West Side of Manhattan an ethno-religion, maybe, okay? Because they're all busy with, I don't know what, the Jewish comedians and stuff. If you want to make all Jews an ethno-religion, that doesn't make any sense, no matter how you define ethnicity. I'll give you any definition you want.
I think that makes sense. But I want to move on to what you were talking before about. You saying that Zionists wanted to change the identity of Jewish people. I think you said they saw them as disgusting, immoral. You even mentioned ugly, weak, etc. What is your ideal definition of Jewish people, and how do Zionists change that?
The Jewish people are people deputized by God, entered into a covenant with God to fulfill the Torah. The Torah is a lifestyle, and it comes with what we call in Hebrew midos. It comes in their values, their character traits that we strive to achieve, humility, pacifism. Jews don't like war. We know that in the Bible there are two brothers, Yaakov and Esav, Jacob and Esav. We know that Esav was the hunter, and Yaakov sat in the tent studying, and those are the prototypes of what an anti-Jew is. I don't mean anti-Semite, I mean the opposite of a Jew versus a Jew himself. We know that Jews are studious, and we strive for the values that'll get us stature in the afterlife, in the next world, and not in this world.
I mean, on the pacifist point, what do you mean? Like, what do you ideal as a? Because that's, I think, the main point where you say Zionism disagrees.
Well, it's not the main point, but it's one of them.
Yes. Yeah, so how do you idealize Jews could really live their lives in a pacifist way?
I'll tell you, because in Judaism, I'll tell you a story. I heard this from Rabbi Shmuel Miller, his name was. He's not around. He passed away in COVID. He was once going to collect money for a good cause. He drove one of the greatest rabbis of that time, the 1950s, was Rabbi Aaron Kotler, to somebody's house. And he went in, the two of them, and they were waiting for the guy to come. And while they were waiting, so Rabbi Kotler grabs Rabbi Miller, who wasn't a rabbi then, by the wrist and says, "We're getting out of here. We're getting out of here." And he's like, he turned white, and they left. And he asked the rabbi, "What happened?" He said, "A gun. I saw a gun in this guy's house." A gun? Guns are useful for self-defense, but to be displayed, we don't like even harming even animals. We don't, the idea of cruelty is the opposite of what a Jew is supposed to strive for. Even when in the Bible, people are going to, I know people when you post this, people in the comments are going to say, "What do you mean there's so many wars in the Bible?" So I'm going to tell you the Jewish interpretation of those wars. How do you imagine, let's say, King David fighting wars? And by the way, as it says in the Bible, God told King David he is unqualified to build the temple because he shed too much blood. And King David is a hero. He never shed blood unjustifiably. But just the act of shedding blood, Maimonides explains, leaves a stain on one's character, even one as sublime as King David.
You're saying Judaism as a religion is a very pacifist religion, runs away from any sort of violence.
Yes, but more than that, the explanation of the wars in the Bible, right? People who read the Bible that don't have the Orthodox Jewish tradition, look in what they call the Old Testament, and they see every other page is wars and fighting and killing and stuff like that. And there's the Philistines and all of the. So the following is the Jewish tradition about that. In the days of the Enlightenment people, there were Jews who wanted to modernize the Jewish people, to similar to the Zionists, but in a completely different way. He wanted to change the values of the Jewish people, make them more modern and worldly. speak many languages, particularly German. They didn't, and they used to put out publications like the Zionists did, making fun of the Orthodox Jews, because mockery is part of the propaganda. And they put out a play and a comic strip that was talking about the Jews going to war, and it was a biblical story. The Jews have to go to war. So the Kohen Mashuach Mulchama, the priest that recruits soldiers for war, he gets up there and he says, okay, who wants to fight a war? There's an important war. And there are thousands of people that answer the call. Then he says, okay, but the rule is, if you just got married, you can't fight. Some people leave. You just built a house, you have to go home. Some people leave. If you are afraid of your sins, if you sin sufficiently enough that you don't believe that God's going to protect you, if you even violate small rabbinic commandments, you can't fight. More people go home. At the end, there are only 2 recruits left, a Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik and a Rabbi Israel Meir Kagan, who were the saintly people of that generation, early 20th century. And it was funny. And everybody was laughing. Just imagine, like nowadays, how they would display this in a video. They would pan the camera out. They would have these 2 rabbis panning it out, and you'd see the whole place empty. Whereas a minute before, it was full of recruits. It's funny. So they ran actually to Rabbi Soloveitchik, and they were embarrassed. They said, Rabbi, look what they said about us. What do we answer? And he said, let me see this. And he looked at it, and he looked at the first panel. He said, this is true. Second one, this is right. He went through the whole thing, says it's all true, except they left out one part. We won the war. The Jewish Orthodox tradition is that the wars in the Bible were all fought miraculously, not because of weapons, as it says in the Bible.
So you're saying those 2 people won the war against the whole army?
What?
Are you saying those 2 people won a war against the whole army?
That's correct. So
and in the Jewish Bible, okay.
Yes, we have in the book of Malachim Beis, Kings 2, where Elisha the prophet is on a mountain and his servant is with him, or the kid that takes care of him. And they're surrounded by sus v'rechev v'chayil koved, it says, horses and chariots, and a heavy, a respectable, an honorable, a large army. And the kid goes to Elisha, he says, behold, master, what will we do? They're surrounded, 1 prophet and 1 kid. And Elisha, the prophet, turns up to the sky and says, could you, God, open this kid's eyes? And then he sees a whole army of angels to the horizon. And the Aramean army was smitten with blindness, etc. Even when there was actual fighting in the Bible, our tradition tells us, this is our interpretation, our religion, Judaism, that we do not aspire at all to be strongmen. We do not aspire to be...
So in that way, do you see Jews, let's say, there's a lot of Jewish people who are like in Israel, the GDP per capita is very high. A lot of Jews are very rich. Is that...
No, you're allowed to be rich. That's not the problem.
But what I mean, by getting a lot of times when you get into these powerful positions, you have to make harsh decisions which hurt people. Is that against Judaism?
Wait, so the answer...
How much of it is that pacifist? That's what I'm trying to ask.
Right. So the answer is that in terms of decisions that hurt people, each one is an individual question that has to be judged by itself. We have laws, as you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of laws. We have books that could fill libraries about what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. But what I'm saying is different. That the idea, the soldier, the warrior ethos is the opposite of what we strive to do. There's nothing, when I was a kid, so kids would hang on their wall posters of Bruce Lee, right? Or maybe Muhammad Ali. That, if the rabbi in class or an Orthodox parent would know that would be a bad thing for a kid to do. It's harmless, don't harming anybody, but the idea to idolize boxing matches and warriors, to be a warrior, the whole idea of people getting killed in bloodshed is...
So wait a second, do people look up to King... You mentioned King David participates in a lot of wars. Do people look up to King David?
Yes. But again, number one, there are times and places where war is necessary, but
When
that's
is war necessary?
either self-defense or when a prophet says that when God says to do it,
So talking about self-defense, isn't that what Israel has done? Like,
no,
all
now
the war's
you're
been
getting
self-defense.
into the politics. Yeah, sure. You've had Eli, you've had. I'm not even going to go there because you have had so many of these people on your podcast who have been fighting with each other about that question. I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to reference those other guys, but that's not even the point. The point is, do you admire the soldier? Not a question of when do you pull the trigger. When do you?
I don't think, like in Israel, they admire people killing people. They admire people standing up and defending
That's
themselves.
not the question. The question is like this. In Israel, actually, is one of the maybe the most militarized country in the world, meaning in the United States of America, people who become leaders of the country are usually, more often than not, or at least our president is a great exception to this in many ways currently, but the way to become a leader is mostly if you graduate from an elite university or you have an education, you were a lawyer or something like that. In Israel, if you are a military leader, you are more likely to be a leader of the country. The military in Israel is not merely a place of self-defense. The military in Israel is an educational institution. Ben Gurion said, and I'm happy you brought this up, the military in Israel, even if they would never fight a war, and I'm not getting into
We'll leave the politics aside. Yeah.
We'll leave out the politics, but the purpose of the military in Israel is not the same as the military in the United States or the UK. Ben Gurion, after it was 1951, I think he said, getting back to your idea of a country and a nation, he said, we have a country, but we don't have a nation. Meaning, Israel at the beginning was full of all sorts of Jews from different backgrounds, different places, and they did not have a common culture, a common, when I say language, I don't mean Hebrew. I mean a common, way of communicating. I mean more like a language in terms of culture, common values.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
When I say me and you don't have a language to speak together, it means right. There's nothing in common. So what he did was the first thing he said: the army is going to fill that role. In Israel's army, there's a book which
Israel's army is
still have here.
Israel's army is going to shape people's beliefs in terms like they learn about their history, become more pro their country.
No, not pro their country. The Israeli army, in this book that I have over here, it's called Civil Religion in Israel, by two Israeli academics, Charles Liebman and Eliezer Dan Yahya. It describes Zionism as what he calls, and it's not his word, it's a very common phrase, a civil or civic religion. Religion without God, kind of like it has its rituals, it has things you die for, things you kill for, without utility. For ideology. But in this book, he has about how Israel's army, the officers' training manual, was found to include topics for discussion with the soldiers of things like this. What is Judaism? Is Judaism a civilization? Right. In other words,
teaching about the country's ethno-religion, like what their main...
But what's the religion? Is Judaism a religion or a civilization or what?
I hope they would teach about that. Yeah, sure.
What?
I would hope they would teach about it. It's a Jewish country.
Yes, except the problem is, here it is. What is Judaism? The uniqueness of the Jewish people, the people and the land in a Jewish perspective, war in the army in a Jewish perspective, okay? What is Kiddush Hashem? Is Judaism a religion, a way of life, or a constitution? The identity of the Jewish people. The problem is that this is religious education, correct?
They actually say, you mentioned, I've heard you say before, what is a Kiddush Hashem? I've never heard that, which just means how you're sanctifying God's name. I've never, ever seen that. And I've done some research on that.
Page 179. This is the book.
Is this actual documentation or just?
Yes. No. This is real. Yes.
This is a copy of what?
If you want, you could Google your research. That's where I got it from. If you want to look it up, it's right here in this book. There you go.
Free
Page
advertising.
179.
Oh, wow.
Okay, now, if you do want, you could look up the word Akedah, which we know refers to Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac. To them, it's somebody who died in Israel's battles, or they have that expression. But this is religious education. As you just mentioned, it's a Jewish country. The problem is that the army, that the religious education that they're giving does not coincide with the religious education that my religion teaches me. So in other words, imagine if the British Army would tell their recruits, what you learned in church about Christianity is not true. What your pastors and priests and your pope, I know it's not a Catholic country, but whatever, taught you about Christianity is not true. We in the government will tell you what your religion is. And you are obligated by draft, by law, otherwise you go to jail, to come to this army. And this is one of the purposes of the army, to change your personality.
Well,
to
you don't actually need to go. You can go to Jewish college. You can go to yeshiva.
You can, and that's your choice. But what they
Yes,
teach
so
you in
they're
the
not
army
forcing
is
you
not
to.
your choice, and that is forced religious indoctrination. And that is wrong. But besides being wrong, if they were to say, you know, we have a religion, it's called Zionism. This is what we believe, it's not a problem. But my problem is that I'm against Zionism because, like I said, Zionism is against me. We Jews, my definition of Jew was here way before Israel or any Zionist, including the evangelicals, ever were born. Come these guys and say, we don't like the way the Jews are. We want to transform the Jews from a guy like Yaakov Shapiro, into a guy like Ariel Sharon, into a guy like Benjamin Netanyahu. How are we going to do that? Why would a Jew want to be that? Look, if a guy's not religious and he wants to be whatever he wants, he has a choice. But what is Jewish about that? You see, originally they tried to
So I'm just
assimilate.
trying to work out. Are you saying that it's wrong that you're forced into draft into an army? Like you have to go to Jewish college, or what's the issues? Or is that what they're teaching?
It's what they're teaching. It's that Israel's army is a religious indoctrination camp, and forced religious indoctrination is a contradiction to democracy. So if Israel's army was a normal army, but the truth of the matter is, if Israel's army was a normal army, the only way that would happen is if Israel was a normal country, the country of the Israelis, not the country of the Jews. When they decided that somebody who practices Christianity, who was born Jewish, is not a Jew, but an atheist, a godless heretic, is a Jew, it's because they are thinking in their mind of what they want the Jews to become. What they want the Jews to become, they don't care if there's a Jew that's religious, as long as he's a Zionist. But they don't want Jews walking around with like bishop hats and crosses around their necks. So that's why, that's not Jewish. Even though by any definition of Jew, it would not make sense. Ben Gurion actually wrote to many, who he considered authorities on Judaism, religious people, non-religious people, his idea. I have a book about this, the entire episode. And many people wrote back to him about what is a Jew. And many people wrote back to him, how does it make sense that if a Jew could be an atheist, but not believe in Christianity? Let's take what happens over here. The people accuse Israel of being racist, a Jewish supremacist. I say that's not really true. No. Israel is just the citizenship structure is the problem, not any racism. Israel is the country of the Jewish nation, not the Israeli citizens. That's what all these court cases are about. Once you establish that, those two facts, those two Zionist delusions.
What, that Israel is for Jews?
Not for Jews, not for Jews. You could be a democracy and be for Jews, but Israel, the Jews are a nationality, and Israel is the state of that nationality. Israel is to the Jews what France is to the French. So now, even if you're an Israeli citizen, you should not have as many rights as if you're a Jewish national, just as if you are British non-citizen, you don't have as much rights as a citizen. Britain was made for its citizens. Israel was made for a certain nationality. not citizenship. And therefore, if you're of the Jewish nationality, according to Israel's interpretation thereof, not according to Torah or God's or Judaism's interpretation thereof, but if you are of the Jewish nationality, not the Jewish religion, if you have the Jewish nationality, then Israel is your country. Now, you're going to counter that and say, yeah, but it's still racist because I can become an American national, a British national, an Italian national by naturalization. How do I become a Jewish national? It's different than nationalities. So I'll say, well, you can convert. Okay, but the rabbinate in Israel will not let you convert unless you're religious. So if a guy comes...
What do you mean they'll not let you convert unless you're religious?
The conversions in Israel are not valid in Israel unless they're done according to Orthodox law.
But you can do it by reform, can't you?
No, not in Israel.
So it have to be done outside?
No, it has to be, yes, because in Israel, like England, there's no separation of church and state. And the chief rabbis in Israel, like England, they got this idea from England, actually, during the mandatory period, that the chief rabbis, they have two in Israel, Ashkenaz and Sfard, are employees of the state, just like in England. And they determine law. And according to their law, you have to be, it's not a valid conversion unless you're religious. So what that means is that if a guy comes, he's born in Israel, he's a Druze. Let's say he's a Druze. Okay, they're real Zionists. Sure. They speak Hebrew perfectly. They're some of the fiercest fighters in the IDF. They willingly go to the army. So now they come, say, I want to become, but you know what? Israel's not my country. I want self-determination rights. I love this country. This is the Jewish state. I want to become a Jew. But you know what kind of Jew I want to become? My role model? Benjamin Netanyahu. He is God to me. I want to follow in his footsteps. I had plastic surgery. I look just like Netanyahu. I have his hairstyle. Everything. I am a Netanyahu fanatic. I want to be like him. Says the rabbinate, you know what? That's not a valid conversion because Netanyahu is not Orthodox. He's not religious. If you want to be like Benjamin Netanyahu, you're not a good enough Jew. That's not a good enough Jew to convert to become a Jewish national. Say, all right, you know what? You know what I'm going to do?
But wait a second, can that Jewish national go outside of Israel, convert outside, and then come back in?
So it depends. He can't, not if it's reform. No, he can't. Marriage works that way, by the way. That happens for marriages.
That's why there's gay marriage, and you're allowed to have outside, then come in.
That works for marriage, but not for conversion. The Israeli rabbinate will not recognize as a Jew somebody who is not converted. And even what you're saying, that if they were to make it that you can go out and convert non-Orthodox and then come here as a Jew, and you're still not Orthodox, how does that make any sense in terms of being a Jewish national? We're not talking about religion. Remember, Jew is not religious identity according to the Israelis. The prime minister of Israel is not religious. It's not a religion. It's a nationality. But you cannot become this nationality unless you convert. But if I do go, so listen to this, Eli. So if I want to become a Jew like Netanyahu or Ariel Sharon or Theodore Herzl, I can't. You say, you know what? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. The guy comes to Yaakov Shapiro and he says, look, I want to convert. What do I do? So I say, no problem. Let's do a conversion, but it has to be Orthodox. And not only that, I'm an anti-Zionist rabbi. I'm against Zionism. I think Zionism is poison for every single human being on this planet. It's no benefit to anybody, especially not the Jews. And you become Jewish and religious, and you're an anti-Zionist. Guess what? That's valid conversion in Israel.
Yeah.
That's valid conversion. The Israeli identity, the whole idea of a Jewish state as defined by Israel makes no sense. It's an absurdity.
Yeah.
And the reason it's an absurdity is because they tried to take Jewish identity and make it into something that it's not.
Yeah, I mean, let me go to a few points
Sure.
You've said about being a Zionist. So you said Zionism is idol worshippers and settlers are no further away from Jews for Jesus. That you can't really be a Zionist and be Jewish.
Correct.
So everyone living in Israel, can you give some explanation to that?
Yeah, sure. And it's not my idea.
I mean, you said it, so.
No, I know, I said that, but I didn't originate it. This has been stated by Orthodox rabbis from the inception of Zionism. I'm just referencing this tradition. Jewish identity is being a Jew. The definition of being a Jew is your job description as given by God, is your religion. Anytime you use the adjective Jewish, it refers to your job as part of your religion. Your Jewishness is your connection to God. There's no, when we say Jewish food, it's a colloquialism. There really isn't Jewish food. As you probably know, in London, it's like this too. If you go to a Jewish neighborhood and go to the restaurants, the food is going to be mostly pizza and sushi, okay? So the food isn't Jewish. There may be food that Jews eat, but when you really say Jewish, and we say, because I'm Jewish, I therefore something that is necessarily part of your religion. And therefore, if I say, because I'm Jewish, I have to pray. Good. If I say, because I'm Jewish, I have to love my fellow Jew. If I say, because I'm Jewish, I'm not allowed to hurt even an animal. Tsar balei chayim. It's all true. If I say, because I'm Jewish, as a Jew, I must be a Met fan. That's a baseball team here in New York.
I think we all know. We've heard of them.
Okay, you did. Okay,
Yeah.
Now you're saying that's part of your religion, adding something to your religion that God didn't give you. Another ism, nationalism. You're adding, a Jew has to be a nationalist. A Jew has to be a baseball fan because you're a Jew. As a Jew, that by definition is whatever you do as a Jew, that's part of your worship. And if it's not what God said, it's worship of, literally, idol worship in Hebrew, avodah zarah, a worship of something foreign. So if you believe that nationalism is part of Judaism, nationalism, what unites Jews is a nationality. What unites Jews, that the Jews have a connection
you'd go into a settlement, many settlements, and they don't believe that. They're religious people who create these settlements, and they don't believe that nationalism is like, maybe it used to be like that when, you have to fight for your land. Not anymore.
Yeah, well, if you have a regular Haredi Jew that agrees with everything I say and has a cheap house in Kiryat Sefer or something,
I think a lot of Israeli settlements would believe Zionism and Judaism is separate. I love my country, but yeah.
I would differ with you on the numbers over there when you say a lot. What I'm saying is, and let's clarify. Rabbi Kook Sr. and his son Jr., the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva, who started the idea of settlements, today's the Hilltop Youth and the schools that these people go to, all teach that Zionism is part of Judaism. They do. Not only that, but you hear Israeli politicians, guys like Smotrich, Ben Gvir, these guys they absolutely do consider a lot of Zionism part of Judaism. Now they may tell you, oh, that's not Zionism, that's Judaism, because Rabbi Kook took nationalist philosophy literally. I mean, literally, he took nationalist philosophy. I'm talking about Hegel, Bergson, things like that. He translated it into mystical Hebrew language, wrote it in Hebrew books, presenting it to his students as if it's Judaism, and they believe it.
He wrote these books. He clearly said it was his books, and then gave it to his students. Okay,
yes, and the main school. This is the school of thought that spawns the settlers. Now,
what do you mean by this is the school of thought that spawns?
Because the history of the settlements in the West Bank, where even the people that went there to settle went there because, well, it's biblical Judea and Samaria, and they're obligated to conquer the entire land.
So which years are we talking about? Like, from which years? From 1948 already?
After 67.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it's
now,
right.
The original Rabbi Kook died before Israel existed, but his son took over. There's a lot of documentaries and research on this. But if you prefer, I'll say the original settler philosophy. Anybody that believes that the state of Israel has something to do with Judaism. Either Aschalta de Geula, which is a phrase many of them use, the beginning of the redemption, or that there's some connection between the Jews and the land. They tell a story about Joseph Trumpeldor. Joseph Trumpeldor was a one-armed, he lost an arm, a Russian soldier who later came to fight in Israel before Israel. He was killed in a battle of Tel Chai, and legend has it, of course it's a fake story, that when his blood went into the soil, out came red poppies. And his last words, legend has it again, "It is good to die for your country." An idea like that, which, you understand the meaning behind that story. It's a copulating between a person and the land, the fertilization of the land that brings out life, that German vitalism, the idea, the Bluttenboden, the connection between a person and the land that goes way beyond the Torah's value of the Holy Land. Which, yes, these settlers and their schools, and I hate to say it, not merely settlers, have. Many people. This is subtle, but there's a very big difference between Judaism and Zionism in this sense. When I say Zionism, when referring to them, I mean their religious doctrine that the land of Israel is connected to the Jews or connected to our history. The land of Israel is connected to the Jews in an additional way, more than just what Judaism says, but rather what nationalism says. And I'm telling you, they don't even know the difference because they've blurred the edge between Judaism and nationalism. And that in the state of Israel, from a historical perspective, is more than just a bunch of random, they're more than just another, like the Ottoman Empire. So now it's the Zionist Empire, creating. If you think it's more connected to the Jews, that's not part of Judaism.
All of
It's
this
new
that you're
religion.
talking about, that you're seeing,
Sorry,
all of this that you're saying, that settlers see nationalism and Zionism and all this, that they're willing to die for their country. I don't know if you haven't said that, but I presume that's what you mean as well, that they're willing to die for their country.
Not for the country. It's not dying
For
for
the
the
land,
country.
for the land.
I have in my book interviews they had with settlers. They asked them, "Why do you live here if it's so dangerous?" It is dangerous there. It's the most dangerous place in Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting much less. It's much less dangerous now. Yeah,
it's true, but still,
and depends which settlements, by the way, you're in as well.
Fair enough, but they asked. There are plenty of settlements that are populated, well populated, and are dangerous. And they said, "Well, what do you mean?" And some guy's brother-in-law died or sister-in-law was killed. One of these things, and he's there with kids. And they say, "Well, what do you mean? This is our land. We have to risk our life for our land." Listen, I'm sure you've heard that the 6-Day War, when Israel got the territories and the Western Wall, the Kosel, right? Yeah. I'm sure you've heard people saying what a victory it was for the Jews because we got the Kosel. So I have to tell you that in Judaism, as you surely know, that one person should die for a Kosel is a blasphemy. As you surely know, that in Judaism, except for 3 cardinal sins, idol worship, murder, and adultery/incest, we do any sin in order to save a life. A pregnant woman would drive to the hospital on Shabbos, right? Because and 1,000 Jews would, 1,000 ambulance workers doctors would break Shabbos 1,000 times each. If there's a 1% chance they can save one person, and yet there are Jews that believe it was worth fighting a war and having people killed so they can get a wall. It's insane. That's Zionism. That's the values that they changed. What you give your life for, what's valuable.
Well, I mean, I don't know about the Kosel, but I can say like the rest of what they gained, except for Jerusalem, they offered to give it back for peace. So they used it for peace, and we don't need to go into that. What I'm trying to work out,
the idea that the biography of Ariel Sharon is called Warrior. With him over there. The idea that a Jew should be proud, that on his biography he should be proudly remembered as a warrior.
So why would you count that settlers are, like you called it, they're one of the worst sins in Judaism as idol worship?
I'll tell you why. Because the religious, there are two reasons why people support Israel. And by support Israel, I mean want Israel to exist. Okay?
Not support the actions it takes, just want it to exist.
Just want it to exist.
Okay, sure.
I want it to exist. Support its existence as a Jewish state.
Yeah.
One, there's an ideology called Zionism. Ancient homelands, we're returning, this returning home kind of thing. Then there's a utility. Well, it's a safe place for Jews. Okay? They're two separate things. There are people, when the original Zionist Congress took place, the original ones, the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were Orthodox Jews that wanted a place for the Jews to escape anti-Semitism.
So, like I said, so two reasons. One, biblically, one is for safety. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Reines, that was his name, he had a group called the Mizrahi. They were what passed for religious Zionists in those days. They were very much against the ideology of Zionism. He actually said that nationalism, the people in his group said nationalism is idol worship, literally idol worship, but they wanted a safe place. So guess what? When they had a choice between Palestine or Uganda/Kenya, the religious ones voted for Kenya and Uganda. They said, whatever's easier, safer, why do we need the Holy Land? We just want a place. It doesn't matter if it's Madagascar or Argentina, just a place where we could be safe. There were ideological Zionists, however, not even religious ones, nationalists, that said, no, we have some connection, ancient heritage, homecoming.
Well, is that what you're saying? Theodore Herzels believed it was
yes. Whether he believed it or not is a big disagreement and debate among Zionist historians and scholars. Yoram Hazoni says,
based on what you're saying, it seems that's likely they would choose Israel just off the.
Yeah, what he did was but what he did was he definitely wanted Israel in order to market it to the Jews.
Sure, yeah, that practicality of it.
Now, whether he believed it or not is a debate amongst them, but he marketed it to the Jews. The religious ones said, we have no religious reason to go there, to be there. Speaking Hebrew? Why? Why speak Hebrew? This identity creation was a purely secular thing. So ironic that they took our things that are dear to us, the Holy Land, the holy language, right? And they made it into the national land, the national language. And they took it and transformed it. And they even made Jews into a nationality rather than Mamleches Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh, what we're enjoined to be by the Bible, a kingdom of priests and a holy people. The Holy Land, holy language, holy people, that's what it's supposed to be. Nationality, national land, national language. The religious Jews had no interest in that. They only had an interest in, most of the religious Jews said, we don't want anything to do with these Zionists. It's an insane idea. It'll cause wars. It's against our religion, all sorts of reasons. But the religious Zionists in those days wanted actually Uganda. Then came Rabbi Kook. He changed everything. He invented what today would generally be called religious Zionism, mostly.
This is going back towards settlers, right?
Yes. This is the origin of the settlers. Rabbi Kook, who died, if memory serves, 1935. He was the first chief rabbi of mandatory Palestine. Okay, where the ultra-Orthodox Jews knew that he was a Zionist, meaning he was a Jewish nationalist. So then they created their own chief rabbinate, which is today the Eidach Redis, in order not to recognize the Zionist rabbinate. So today, if you ask somebody who's the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, if you ask a Haredi, it's Rabbi X. If you ask somebody not, it's Rabbi Y. But in any case, there was this Rabbi Kook. He took secular nationalism, 19th century nationalism, and I mean literally, Hegel, Herder, Bergson, these guys took the ideology, regurgitated it in Hebrew, mystical, rabbinic language, taught it as if it's some Jewish mysticism, and there are people that think it's Kabbalah. It's in the colleges in Israel. They teach uh, things like this is what Hegel called the cunning of reason, and Rabbi Kook called this and this. He lifted this nationalist ideology, created new values in the Jews, said if a Jew is not religious, but he's committed to the building up of the nation, to Zionism, to the resurrection of the nation, right? Then he has a higher part of his soul or his spirit. Forget about how to translate it technically. His spirit is higher than a religious Jew that's not a Zionist.
So don't mean to interrupt, but how does this get back to the settlers?
Because his son took over. He had a big yeshiva, and he was teaching nationalism. And part of this is conquering the land. Nationalism means you have to have a land, and you are organically connected to the land in some mystical way. That's nationalism. Remember, the people are born here. There's a connection. So even though they believe the Jews were born on Mount Sinai, they still believed in a nationalist, not Jewish, a nationalist philosophical connection to the land, a blood and soil type connection. And they believed it was presented to them as Judaism, but to us it was another religion. They started the first settler movement, the Merkaz Harav Yeshiva, the settlers, the hilltop youth, the guys that went there against the rules, against the laws of Israel then, the guys who Ariel Sharon went to kick out. That's these guys. It's those guys that then they spread out their philosophy, their ideology, and then it came... Conquering the land was part of that. This idea of religious conquest of the land, how these people now that want to settle Gaza, they're all from the school of thought of Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who was son of Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, who founded the movement of the settlers, the Gush Etzion. These guys.
So you're saying, just to be clear, you're saying it's very wrong because they are willing to give up their lives and they're missing Zionism to Judaism?
Willing to give up their lives as a result of what's wrong, because they took nationalism and falsely said it's Judaism. They took a whole new religion, whole new ideology, and presented it as against Judaism.
But maybe that's true when it was very dangerous to create a settlement. But now when settlements are very normal, with Efrat, you've got these very big settlements which have become very safe. Why are those people who go there for the help of it? Why are those people idol worshippers?
No. I'm not saying that everybody who lives in Efrat.
You said settlers are idol worshippers.
I meant what I mean by that is the school of thought of the settler movement. Okay. So if I say I mean the school of thought of the settler movement, right?
Yeah.
And you can include in that people like Smotrich, Ben Gvir. These hilltop youth people, all these guys. That woman, I forgot her name, who's busy trying to settle Gaza now. Because
you talking about Trump?
What?
You talking about Trump?
Well, no, Trump is not a woman. But there's, I'm against Trump's plan as well. But I meant that settlers are a movement. It's like, let's say, Hasidim, you can say, by way of analogy. There's a Hasidic movement that was started by the Baal Shem Tov, and there are people who just dress the part, right? I mean the ideology of the settlers. That's what I mean. The ideology of the settlers is an ideology of idol worship, the Jewish nationalism. And I'll give you an example of where this pertains. I'll give you an example. And this has influenced Jews of all stripes. And this is what I try to negate. The Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is a holy place.
And as biblical land of Israel.
Biblical land of Israel is a holy place. And Maimonides records how righteous people used to, when they reached by boat in those days, the Holy Land, they would bend down and kiss the ground. Okay? And there are people who still do it. They bend down and kiss the ground when they get there because it's a holy place. Now, Jews, just for your viewers, we kiss all holy objects. When we put on tefillin in the morning, we kiss them. The mezuzah, we kiss. Now, not everybody does it, but it's not an unusual thing. Part of Lebanon is technically, officially, the biblical land of Israel, right? Eilat is not. But part of Lebanon is. So now, if what really is attracting you to the Holy Land is the holiness of the land, as opposed to Zionism, as opposed to the nationalism, as opposed to all the other non-Jewish stuff that masquerades as Judaism and Jewish. So if you are in the town of Nakora, which, if I'm pronouncing it right, is it's on the southern Lebanese border, right?
You're saying where that would be in biblical Israel?
That's biblical Israel. And
Okay.
You're walking in there and you're Jewish and you see all the Muslims, the Arabs, the women with the, covered, and you're smelling the non-kosher food and you're hearing the Arabic music, and it's an Arabic town. If you are drop less inclined to bend down and kiss that land than you are in Haifa or Tel Aviv or Bat Yam, then it's not the holiness of the lands that you're kissing. It's something else. Because the land is equally holy. And I'll tell you something else. According to Jewish law, the way people behave in the land affects the holiness of the land. The holiness of the land, if you go down, you were in Jerusalem, you said last week? Are you in Israel?
This week, yeah.
This week, okay. May I ask what neighborhood?
I have no idea.
Okay, fine. So if you're in downtown Jerusalem and you're walking down Rehov Yafo, right, the main street down towards the old city, right, near the Mamiya Mall, and you see a nightclub here and a bar over there, and selling anti-Jewish heretical books in a secular bookstore, Stemetsky's or whatever, Judaism says that the holiness of the land actually flees. Part of the holiness flees from that spot as the land itself screams in agony, because it's a holy land, it's a synagogue, it's God's backyard, and you're committing sins in it. And it should pain Jews to see that. Now, if not everybody's on the spiritual level to be pained, but if you walk down that same street and you feel more Jewish because of the language that's spoken, that nightclub is the word nightclub is written in Hebrew font, the Hebrew letters, and the books that are the secular books, let's say the atheist books that say the Torah is not true, are written in Hebrew, and that you get a feeling of more comfort than when you walk down the streets of New York, because you feel more Jewish than you have a distorted sense of what being Jewish is. Being Jewish used to be, and still is, for non-Zionist Jews, a connection to God. Israel is Jewish in the sense that its holiness is valuable to us, and its land is valuable as a holy place. To feel Jewish, to aspire to Jewishness that doesn't involve God, the Torah, and is even sometimes opposed to it, or things that are diametrically opposite it, but have the language, the land, and a Jewish culture, whatever that may be. Israel invented what they call a Jewish culture. Then that's literally you have misidentified. You have changed your Jewish identity. You are a Zionist, because the goal of Zionism was to transform the Jewish identity, the Jewish feeling, the Jewish aspiration, what makes you feel Jewish, what you aspire to as a Jew, what you value as a Jew, from God, holiness, Torah, Bible, our character's traits, to the nationalist ones. And it affects people subtly. It affects people sometimes more openly. But that's Zionism, and
okay, yeah.
that's what,
yeah. So yes, I want to move on. So you mentioned before the interview, you said you wanted to focus on a few things. We'll cover a few.
Okay.
The other 2 points is, how does it contribute towards the conflict of the Palestinians, and how do we end the conflict? I'll let you go.
Okay, I'll tell you. Obviously, the conflict with the Palestinians, whenever people debate it, including on your podcast. So the question in most people's mind is, how do we balance the Jewish connection to the land, the Jewish homecoming to the land, the Jewish rights to the land, versus those of the Palestinians, right? Or you could make a Jewish national home, but somewhere else. I think Elon Pappy said that on your podcast, that he doesn't matter.
Yeah, he did say that. Yes, yeah,
Okay, if they buy islands somewhere off near Ibiza, there are islands for sale over there. I don't remember if he said Ibiza, but wherever they buy an island, and that's not a problem. It's just a problem with the Palestinians. But the assumption is that this is the Jewish state. This was the Jewish national movement. This was the national self-determination movement of the Jewish people, that the Jews are entitled to exercise rights to self-determination, right? So all of that is a distraction, because all of that is false premises. The fact is, Zionism was not the national self-determination Jewish people, it was the national self-determination movement of the Zionists. Israel is not the Jewish state. It is the state of the Israelis. They claim to be the Jewish state, and we saw what that means. So all of this is an illusion. All of this is, the question is political, has nothing to do with Jews, historical, nothing. Because the creation of the state of Israel had nothing to do with the Jews' historical rights, desires, or aspirations. As it says in Israel's Declaration of Independence, for 2,000 years, the Jews wanted to come back to Israel. False. That's not true. We wanted the Messiah to come, not that the Messiah should bring us back to Israel. See, the Zionists distorted this as well.
So just to be clear, so your thing is to move it into, let's say, a different country, into Uganda or something?
No, I think for sure Uganda would have been better, but I don't think Uganda would have been a good idea. I'm sorry,
From now, where we are now, what's the solution?
Well, now the solution is simply that people, it's all, the problem is based on an illusion. The illusion that Zionism is the national self-determination movement of the Jewish people, that Israel is the state of the Jews, and by Israeli law it is. And this is the Jews' homecoming, and the Jews are exercising their historical rights and aspirations. That word comes up all the time. But the truth is, it's not true. If everybody would understand, if Israel would change their law, that Supreme Court case, Israel's the state of the Israelis, not the state of the Jews. There's an Israeli nationality, one person, one vote. You could annex the West Bank and Gaza like America annexed the Mexicans and made them into Texans. Israel cannot do that now. The reason they have to have a military occupation forever, the reason why they are in trouble with the ICJ and all of this, why don't they just make it Israel? Isn't that a great idea? Well, they can't, because they have to have a Jewish majority. They have to have a Jewish state.
Well, they can just accept them and make sure they don't have votes.
Well, that would still be a Jewish state. Hello, Eli, my country broke off from your country because of taxation without representation, right? You can't own somebody and not give them a vote. That's not an Israeli citizenship.
The people in East Jerusalem who are residents, not citizens, do they have a vote?
Yes, okay, fine. Give everybody citizenship, no residency. Forget the idea of the Jewish state. It's not the Jewish state. Their definition of Jew, they don't own that definition. They are not the Jews. They are not Zion. They are not the Jewish state. It's not the Jewish aspirations. They are a bunch of Jews with an ideology called Zionism that came and claimed in the name of world Jewry, literally, Herzl, Ben-Gurion, in the name of world Jewry, that the Jews are exercising their 2,000-year-old aspiration to return to the Holy Land. Just the Orthodox believe the Messiah will do it, and they are jumping the gun. False. The Jews never wanted what Israel is today. When the Messiah comes, that's not what's going to be. If there's a spiritual renewal of the world, with a resurrected from the dead King David on the throne, where, as it says in the Bible, Kili sichra kol berach tishova kol losho, in the book of Chronicles, God says, then everybody, Jew and non-Jew, will recognize God. And the Holy Land, actually, our tradition says, will expand to the world. That's what we're praying for. Anything less than that, we never asked for, we never wanted, and it's not
practically.
Practically change the law. Practically, no more Jewish state. No more Jewish state. It's the state of the Israelis. This Supreme Court decision.
And should they try to keep a Jewish majority?
That whatever happens naturally. Should England have a Christian majority? Listen, All they have to
So
do is pay.
your solution is to get rid of a Jewish state.
No, not get rid of it. The one does not exist now because their definition of a Jewish state is just false. They're making false claims in the name of all the Jews. If all the Jews all over the world would just say, I'm an American, you're a Briton. We have nothing to do with Israel. We can have an opinion on what Israel does. To me, Israel is no different than Ukraine. Israel claiming it's the Jewish state, it's connected to me, is no different than Ukraine claiming it's the Jewish state.
Why do you speak about it so much?
What?
Why do you speak about it so much? And
because it's an encroachment upon my religion, and it's a transformation of Jewish identity. And Jewish identity is so important to me. And when I do speak about it, as you probably heard, if you've seen a decent amount of my content, is that I claim that a lot of these anti-Zionist Jews really are not anti-Zionist Jews. They're just pro-Palestinian. And there's a difference. Because if let's assume now that there will be a two-state solution, right? And the Palestinians even will get 90% of the land. And Israel would be left with 10% in the Negev desert. But everybody's happy, okay? Israel's happy, the Palestinians are happy. I'm still equally anti-Zionist. Because everything I said about Zionism and why I'm against it would still apply. Israel would still claim to be the country only of the Jews, not of all its citizens, even though most of the Palestinians, it would be irrelevant to them. Israel would still claim to be my state. The problem is, I'm talking about education. The solution is for everybody to just realize what's happened, not get rid of the Jewish state. The Jewish state doesn't exist. Make it a democracy. What the Hasbara handbook said, that the reason why college kids are becoming less Zionist is because they're finding meaning in Judaism. Educate people as to what Judaism is. Has nothing to do with Zionism, nothing to do with Israel. There were no Jewish aspirations ever to return to Israel in the way that it is now. Educate another generation of that. Educate your children, my grandchildren, that the Jews never aspired to what Israel is now. When we say next year in Jerusalem, we never meant that. There's no such thing as historical rights to a land. Countries don't have rights. Israel considers itself the work product of all the Jews. Countries don't consider themselves things. Realize that the definition of a Jewish state that Israel uses is absurd, false, and you do disagree with it. Realize that Israel claiming to be a Jew with the Jewish state is false, and that the entire thing is a scam, using the Jews as human shields for whatever it is they're trying to do there. Make Israel one democracy, not get rid of anything. It's very simple. Change that Supreme Court ruling. There is an Israeli nationality, one person, one vote. Now there's no separate church and state. Even do better than England, make it like America, separate church and state. That would solve everything. No such, and get rid of this idea of Jewish nationality. There is no Jewish nationality. And even if there was, Israel is not its country. That's it. It's so easy. You see, the problem with this, and I can tell from your tone of voice that this is what you're thinking, is that people believe that Israel's existence as the Jewish state, as even part of Jewish identity, is axiomatic, and undoing that would take a tremendous amount of effort, political resources. It's like wild what it would entail. But I'm saying that it would not entail anything at all except for people to be educated. The Zionists claimed to be the Jewish state. I'm not even talking about the Palestinians. Even if this would have been a land without a people, this is what I would want. Everybody should learn about Zionism, because the more you learn about Zionism, the harder it is to be a Zionist. The more you learn about Judaism, the harder it is to be a Zionist, and the Hasbara handbook said that. All we have to do it's all an illusion. There is no Jewish nation state. There is no nation state of the Jewish people. If all the Jews and non-Jews would realize that, if the people in Israel would realize that, it's over. You don't have to end the Jewish state. What they're doing now is they're trying to drop roots in Jewish identity, so that a Jew would feel, without Israel, we're less Jewish. There's less of a Jewish people. My identity is
they feel that in terms of safety.
Not only in terms of safety, in terms of identity, because I want to tell you something about safety. Teach them about safety too. Tell me, Eli, is Israel a safe place for Jews to live?
Sure. Can I read out some statistics? I know you love statistics.
Yeah, sure.
Some people love stories. You love statistics. Okay, so according to Global Terrorism Index, which the UN uses,
Yes.
in 2021, so Israel was very high up on the list, but they've been decreasing every year on average. Of course,
In terrorism, that means the higher you are, the worse it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, of course, in the early years, they were very high up, but they've been going down. In 2021, America was 30th, Israel was 35th. And they were going down and down and down. They're going down more and more. According to the World Health Organization, Israel's homicide rate in 2019 was 5 times lower than America's, lower than Britain, lower than Canada. And also, by the way, they've got very high life expectancy rates, one of the best in the world. So it's pretty actually healthy, good to be there.
So I got to tell you something. Those statistics are misleading. Here's why. Because although it's true that, let's say, America's homicide rates was much worse than Israel, but that's called on the average. There's also another data point called standard deviation, which means in this case that the reason why America's homicide rates are so high is because places like Detroit and Baltimore, certain neighborhoods and drugs where the majority...
We're talking about the whole America as a whole.
What I'm saying is where Jews live, those statistics, those homicide rates are irrelevant, because I am further from Detroit than Israel is than a guy in Jerusalem is from Yemen. All right? I think so. But those statistics don't affect me. The question is where Jews live. Jews have neighborhoods. Where is a Jew safer?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay, now I'll tell you something else. Look, I don't run out and hide hide from missiles when the sirens go off. I have not seen. As a little kid, my mother told me what bomb shelters were because there were signs, for bomb shelters for the Cold War. I have never been scared for my life of a war living here in the United States of America. We live here, Jews. Where Jews live is much safer. And, in Israel, I have a question. Now, people will say, yes, fine, but what are you going to do if there's a Holocaust? Right?
Yeah, what will you do? Yeah, it's a good point, though.
Yeah, well, here's my answer. Number one, first, see, this whole Holocaust thing is also saturated with Zionist propaganda. Tell me, currently, Israel, about 30,000 people were killed in Israel wars and terrorism, right? The Zionists.
What? Since when?
Since Zionism started. Since the Zionists started. About 30,000, I think, before October 7th, approximately. And I mean, the country is only 70 years old, and obviously, there's no end in sight. Nobody has any idea of peace. Netanyahu said, they asked him, we're going to live by the sword forever? His answer was yes. And by the way, living by the sword is the biblical description of the anti-Jew, Esau, Jacob's brother.
Is that why you called Netanyahu an anti-Semite?
No, I call Netanyahu an anti-Semite because he says that Jewish identity doesn't exist, that Jews are subsumed in Israel's identity. He says that my religion does not exist. He says my identity does not exist. He said, page 88 in that book, Among the Family of Nations, that without Israel there are no Jews. That you cannot say you don't want Israel to exist and still want Jews to exist. He is literally somebody that denies Jewish identity.
He said without Israel existence, you don't want Jews. Could that just be in terms of safety?
No, he said the reason why anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, to say, that's the context. He said saying that I like Jews, I just don't want Israel to exist, is the same as saying I like the French identity, but I don't want France to exist.
No, I'm saying maybe he thinks that because
that's not what he said.
Jews.
No, that's not what he said. It's an identity thing, the same as Avigdor Lieberman, that you cannot say that you want Jews to exist and not Israel, just as, and for the same reason, you cannot say, I want French people to exist, but not France. It's the same thing. That's Zionism. But let me ask you something else.
Sure.
Right now, Jews are getting killed. Wars are happening. Anti-Semitism, attacks on Jews, I should say rather, goes up tremendously because of Israel. Anytime Israel's involved in a war or any controversial thing, attacks on Jews go up all over the world. You can find all of that, right? Now,
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Now, all of this, and currently without Israel, these Jews wouldn't be killed. Everything would be fine. This question, well, what are you going to do if there's a Holocaust? Currently, there is no Holocaust. And these deaths, I'm not even talking about the Palestinians now. And please, nobody write in the comments, oh, you see, he doesn't care about Palestinians. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, I want to talk about something else right this second. According to the purely Zionist perspective, even if everything would be fine with the Palestinians, these wars and people dying and the anti-Semitism and all this liability and suffering and death that happens to the Jews because of Israel, because maybe one day there'll be a Holocaust, and maybe we'll be able to escape, and maybe Israel will let us in, because as Ilan Pappy said on your podcast I wrote about in my book, they may not let us in. They didn't. There were books written on this, like in Argentina, the juntas, he called it the general's government. Yes, let's assume that's all true. Tell me, how many Jews have to die before the premium for this insurance policy gets too high?
Sure. I mean, well, should we look at it in maths? 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. Maybe that could happen again. 6 million versus 70,000. I think that's pretty good statistics.
No, that's not true. Because what if there is no Holocaust and all of this is for nothing? In other words, what if there is no Holocaust?
Do you think that without, just to be clear, do you think that without Israel, anti-Semitism could die out?
No. By the way, the Zionists, Herzl, Leo Pinsker, all wrote that with Israel, anti-Semitism will die out.
Well, I'm asking you what your thoughts are.
But it will be reduced, for sure. Because it's very simple. Everybody knows people attack Jews. Whenever Israel gets into a war or does something controversial, attacks on Jews go up. There's nothing to discuss about that.
Around the world, yeah, sure. Yeah,
around the world. And it's very simple why. You remember COVID, so our president called it the Chinese virus, right? And when he did that, there were people here in Chinatown, that's a neighborhood in New York where a lot of Chinese people live, got beaten up because of the Chinese virus. Now, of course, it's criminal to do that. And you can't beat up a Chinese person because of a Chinese virus. But even a criminal is not going to beat up an Irish person because of a Chinese virus.
So I understand. So let me ask you, why, if you go back in history, and you know your history and Jewish history very well, why has every period where there's been peace ended with massacres against Jews, expulsions against Jews?
That's not necessarily so. The Jews, I'll tell you.
And why don't you think that will happen again?
Well, Holocaust is not an expulsion of Jews.
Well, Holocaust was a genocide of Jews.
Holocaust is a guy came, Hitler, and said, I'm taking an army running all around the world, killing all the Jews. And he ended up killing 6 million, which is 6 million too many. When in history, did anybody ever attempt that?
Well, not a genocide, but did they expel people? Did they kill people? Kill Jews? Did they? Not on that level.
It wasn't only Jews. There were blacks that were persecuted. They were dragged here in chains as slaves. After that, they were not given a right to vote. There was Jim Crow. Women just recently got the right to vote. Here's the thing. There are other ways to fight anti-Semitism. Now, we did not have international law once upon a time. We didn't. The world is getting better. Now, does that mean there can't be another Holocaust? No. But here's the question. If in 100, 200, 300 years, there is no more Holocaust and the death rate in Israel continues to grow, at what point do you say it wasn't worth it? I live near the water, between the Atlantic Ocean and Jamaica Bay. And we got wiped out in Hurricane Sandy and in Hurricane Irene. Our neighborhood was mostly underwater. And we want flood insurance, obviously. But you know how expensive it became? Most people cannot afford it.
You know, we saw a lot of this in Florida where they couldn't get fire insurance.
It's exactly the same thing. Yeah. So now the question is...
Not Florida, not Florida. What was it called?
California.
Sorry.
The question is now Holocaust insurance that we pay in blood. at what point in time does the premium become too high?
Well,
See, Zionists,
Israel is becoming safer every year as it goes on.
No, it's becoming safer every year. Excuse me. What happened in October 7th?
On average, it's becoming safer.
On
Very
average,
clearly.
there's no such thing on average as becoming safer every year.
Why not?
Because on average means you're giving the same number to every year. In
No,
other words, you could say in
gradually
general,
decreasing every year. With every now and then, you have offshoots.
Right. So that's not. You're saying in general the trajectory is that way. Yes, fine. What if there's a nuclear Iran? Right. What if there is a Holocaust and let's say United States of America turns against Israel? Will Israel be safe? We're not talking about an expulsion that, I don't know, that there's going to be anti-Semitism in downtown Brooklyn, which when there was that Charlie Hebdo attack.
But do you think Israel, a nuclear entity, deters countries from acting against Jews?
They do. Tell me, did they deter Soviet Russia from acting against Jews? No. Did they deter Argentina? Elon Pappy told you about that, from acting against Jews? No. Israel will not help Jews if it's not in their political interest. Soviet Russia, you're old enough to remember Soviet Russia, Iron Curtain, Jews going to Siberia, the KGB, all of those things, right? Did Israel go and bomb Russia or threaten them? No, it's not true. It's not true at all. What do you think? Tell me what.
They didn't have as much power then.
What?
They didn't have as much.
Right then and there, they said they're there to protect Jews. Tell me, if there's a country that oppresses Jews, you think Israel's what, going to bomb them? You said before, not long ago, about an hour and a half ago, that Israel legally does not take responsibility for the safety of the Jews elsewhere, correct?
Yes.
So now, exactly. So that's the point. Israel had.
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying, does it act as a deterrent that Israel might?
Why does it act as a deterrent? You think Argentina didn't know that thing that Elon Pappy told you?
Do I think countries right now are more scared of hitting Jews because of Israel?
Could you give me an example? What's going to happen to Hungary if Kurt Orban starts persecuting Jews? What's going to happen in Ukraine if the Nazi parties over there start persecuting Jews? What do you think? Israel's going to attack them? Is that what you say? Is that in Israel's Declaration of Independence? Have you ever heard? Anyway, show me in any of the literature of Zionists that that's true. You see, this is part of the Zionist propaganda, the idea that Israel's existence deters Jews. Deters people from oppressing Jews. I don't see it. I see, on the contrary, I see every time there is an anti-Semitic attack somewhere, in France, in Paris, in Copenhagen, Israel's answer is, not don't worry, we'll protect you. Israel's answer is, anti-Semitism is growing. Europe is no longer safe. Come run to Israel. That's their answer. In America, it's like Germany in the 1930s. Come run to Israel. Anti-Semitism is rising. Come run to Israel. Netanyahu, the prime minister, who in Copenhagen and in Paris, both those times, when there was an attack against Jews, his answer was, come to Israel. When there was the shooting here in the Pittsburgh synagogue, right? When there were Jews killed in California, that rabbi got his finger blown off. You think Israel said, don't worry, we're here to protect you? No, they said anti-Semitism is rising. This is, we can still absorb all the Jews of America. Run quickly before anti-Semitism comes. Do you know about the Lavon affair? The Lavon affair in Egypt, it was a false flag.
Just to summarize what you're saying, without Israel, there'll be less anti-Semitism.
I'm saying Israel generates anti-Semitism. I would phrase it in a way to make it more understandable that Israel increases anti-Semitism.
Yes. So you're saying Israel increases anti-Semitism. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think most people disagree, but I guess we'll see.
Most people disagree. I don't understand. You yourself know that the statistics are, most people disagree. The statistics are that every time Israel does a controversial thing, attacks on Jews rise. And when Israel's at peace and nobody has complaints, attacks on Jews go down. So
I believe in a peace solution, in a two-state solution.
No, that's fine. But the fact of the matter is, Israel's actions causes Jews to get hurt. That's a statistical fact. Now, let me ask you something, Eli. Let's assume Israel would just say, you know what? And the Jews would just say, you don't have to get rid of Israel. It's very simple. I have nothing to do with Israel. I'm an American. If somebody would come to beat me up because of Chinese virus and they think I'm Chinese, what do you think I'm going to tell them? What would you tell them? Well, I would tell them, I'm not Chinese. You got the wrong guy. That doesn't mean it's okay to beat up Chinese people. That means I have no. So if somebody comes to me and tells me, and they do all the time, about Israel, look what Israel's doing, your country. It is not my country. I'm an American. If all Jews would say that, attacks on Jews would go down. But because even synagogues, Zionist synagogues, have Israeli flags as part of a synagogue is a religious place, right? It's for religious services. In the front, near the Holy Ark, they have an American flag here because it's illegal to have in a public place only a foreign flag, and an Israeli flag. And in synagogues...
Is that not only in like less religious circles?
No, modern Orthodox circles, Orthodox synagogues, but Zionist Orthodox synagogues. They're called modern Orthodox, but they're absolutely Orthodox synagogues. They do that. And schools, there are streets now in Jewish neighborhoods, not far from where I am, not in my neighborhood, but not far, a 7-minute ride, Israeli flags on a street. Why are there Israeli flags on the street? And then if they target a Jew over there, somebody who's against Israel, targets a Jew over there, it's criminal, yes. But he wouldn't target them, save for the fact that these people are openly displaying the flag of these guys' enemies. I am an American. I have an American flag. Israel's flag is as connected to
You're trying to say that anti-Semitism hate is logical. It's not. It's illogical. People...
But there is logic. Yes, and Israel has added some logical anti-Semitism to it. The same way America herded Japanese into camps during World War II. The same way people beat up Chinese people in Chinatown because of a Chinese virus, people will attack Jews because of Israel. The same way.
Okay, sure.
Yes, in other words, of course anti-Semitism is illogical, but Israel has added anti-Semitism that is very logical and very political. It's still criminal, but the anti-Semitism that Israel has added is the affiliation with a country that has a lot of enemies. Listen, if America bombs Afghanistan, the Afghanis are angry at the Americans. If Japan bombs America, the Americans are angry at Japanese. When Israel bombs Gaza, the people who are pro-Palestinian in Gaza, they should be angry at Israel. But instead, they're angry at the Jews because Israel's the state of the Jews. Yeah. That's the problem. I want to tell you one more thing. We once had a protest here in New York. We had 40,000 people there about 10 years ago against the Israeli attempt to draft the yeshiva guys into their army. And that evening, I was on a radio show. They still had radio shows in those days. There was a Jewish religious guy.
Yeah, I know this. MK, Dov Lipman, right?
Yes, yeah. And he was on the other side, but he was pre-recorded because of the time difference, right? He's in Israel. And they asked him, why are only Jews drafted? I said, look, it's not even a democratic draft. Only Jews are drafted into the Israeli army. If you're Christian or Muslim or Hindu, you're not drafted. Except for Jews.
They do that for safety, but that's for safety.
No, it's not safety because they take Arabs and Muslims if they volunteer. Those are the guys you got to worry about. And if a guy's a Hindu, they don't take either.
What? But they do safety checks on everyone.
What? They can do whatever they want, but they will accept a volunteer, but they will not, they do not draft Hindus. That's not a safety thing. They do not draft Buddhists. They draft only Jews.
They just go overall. They say Jews. I mean, maybe they didn't do everyone. Why are Jews then? Why are Jews then?
Lippman answered.
Yeah.
What do you mean? This is a member of the Knesset who was on Yair Lapid's team to draft the Orthodox Jews.
That was his job, I think, yeah.
Yes, and this was my complaint that why should we be treated differently than the Hindus? Well, you're not a democratic draft anyway. It depends on your religion. Why? Because I'm Jewish, should I be discriminated against and have to go to your army? Draft the Hindus. Do a safety check. Buddhists, you don't draft. Christians,
Druze they do.
What?
Druze, who are very pro-Zionist, do.
Who?
Druze.
Oh, Druze are an exception, yes, but Christians. But even if Christians are pro-Israel, and even if Jews are not pro-Israel, they do. So Dov Lipman answered, well, it's the army of the Jews. It's the Jewish state. You see, this is it. Israel is not a normal country. There is no other country like that. Israel, by its laws, by its own self-definition, does not say it says it's a democracy, but it's the country of the Jews. The Jews have to fight in their army. You're right. They tell the public, the public thinks that it's for safety. All Israel's propaganda is all safety reasons. Whatever they do, self-defense, safety, when they cut off the payas of the Yemenite kids, the immigrants to Israel. They chopped off their payas, forced them to be non-religious. They said in the hearings in the Knesset, it was self-defense because they're afraid of I don't know, diseases, ringworm, or whatever it is that the kids had. It was all nonsense. Whatever Israel does for ideological reasons, they come out and say it's self-defense, it's security. We only draft Jews. Security. If somebody volunteer, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, everybody, nothing. It's the army of the Jews. It's all ideology. And if people would realize this, that Israel does not give Jews security. You're right. You know, if you're right that it's a deterrent, you want to know, everybody's fighting about one state, two state, red state, blue state. You know what I want? If you're right that Israel is a deterrent, then you're right. You have a point, and I'll be wrong. But show me the studies on that. Show me the scholarship on that. There is none, because nobody cares about that, because they don't want to do that. Show me the studies about whether or not it's possible to integrate the Israelis and the Palestinians together eventually. In South Africa, it worked. In other places, it didn't. Again, Ilan Pappy mentioned that to you, right? Here, they freed the slaves. Thomas Jefferson said not to free all the slaves because he was worried. What do you mean? For generations already, they hate us, rightfully so. They're a security risk. The slaves are a security risk. And by the way, you know who the first person was to think of that? We have to enslave and genocide people because they're a security risk?
Who?
Paro in the book of Exodus. He said, let's enslave the Jews because they're a security risk. It was a preemptive genocide and slavery because Pen Yerbem, they have a big population and they're going to join our enemies. Therefore, we have to preemptively enslave them. That was Paro's idea. We have Passover now, and that's what it celebrates. The salvation that we had from God of a guy with that attitude. That idea, well, let's enslave the Jews because it's a preemptive strike because they're a security risk. That's the first place in history that anybody ever thought of such a thing. And we were the victims of that. So therefore, I would like to see, instead of these cliches and these axioms that people just assume, these assumptions that people say are true. If it's true that Israel deters countries, certainly any of these Hasbara handbooks would have these statistics. Certainly Frank Luntz would have some evidence, whether it's as flimsy as it can be, but there is none. These are just things that Jews are taught in grade school or taught by the media or et cetera, things like that, in order for them to say we need Israel. Israel's ideology
it's kind of hard to find a statistic on what didn't happen.
No, but still, there are people maybe who have said politicians in places, okay, let's oppress the Jews. Well, there's Israel. There's
listen, I've never. You know what? Listen, I've never searched that, but I'll give it a research.
Do research, do all of this, and this is what you want a solution. This is the solution. I say that Israel is a liability to the Jewish people. It is not a utility, and we're human shields for them. I say that the reason why Jews are willing to buy into the ideology of Israel is two reasons. There's the ideology of Zionism, which we must dismantle and show that it's absurd and nonsensical, like their definition of Jewish state. Ask Jews, go ahead in England and ask Jews, do you believe England's your country or Israel's your country, or maybe both? Do you believe that a Jew is to Israel what Japan is to the Japanese? If he says no, then he's saying Israel is not the Jewish state. Fine. Publicize this. Then the safety idea. Tell them teach people about how safe and how unsafe Israel really makes us. When you say most Jews would disagree, tell me, Eli, what meaning does that have in the real world? Most Jews would disagree. You know, I argued with somebody the other day. I had a debate about the anti-Semitism on campuses. And people are telling me that Jews don't feel safe and Jews don't feel safe. And I tell them, but just because they don't feel safe doesn't mean they are not safe. You go around telling Jews, you are unsafe, you are unsafe. Anytime somebody says, have peace, ceasefire, they're anti-Semitic. Anytime whatever they say, this is anti-Semitism, that's anti-Semitism, it's all anti-Semitism. So of course you feel unsafe. That doesn't mean anything. Majority of Jews would disagree. You think that the majority of Jews had an objective education, that the media that they watch are objective media? Or do you think that it's a echo chamber, that Jews are a community and this is what they're taught? I'm a Jew. I'm older than you. I was taught the same things, and we continue to be taught the same things. We continue to be taught the same things. Israel is our country. The IDF are our soldiers. Israel makes the world safe for Jews. If not, we don't question it. If people would question it, it would be another thing. And if you do question it, you know what the response is. You're an anti-Semite. So there is controls to make sure that Jews feel this way, but that doesn't make it true.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Very interesting conversation.
Same here. I really enjoyed it.